Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled People Stories. Today we have a very special episode for you, a compilation of some of the best entitled people stories we've read over the past year. So sit back, relax, and enjoy a few hours of the most entitled people you've ever heard of. And by the way, Karen assured me that for every thumbs up this video gets, she won't try to get anyone fired for an entire week. So please smash that like button and subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Entitled ex-girlfriend is mad I never took care of her yard work. This was close to 2 weeks ago, and honestly, I still can't believe it. She broke up with me because she asked me to buy her some resin, and I did, but it was not enough resin, so she complained to me. I didn't respond because I was driving at the time, and the car that I was driving was the company car that has a camera in it that faces the driver. So as I continued to not read the messages, she continued to text me. First, she called me cheap and said that she was tired of dealing with men, that we're all cheap, we don't listen, and I don't appreciate her. She hasn't had a job since May of this year. When I visit, I tend to pay for her Subway. I didn't mind at first because she would cook something and she's a great cook, but over time she stopped cooking and I was paying for more dinners. She lost her crap when I made it clear that I didn't like the idea of spending $90 on one DoorDash meal. While she's chewing me out for the wrong resin, while she's chewing me out for not wanting to spend $90 on a meal for her, she brings up other issues. I let her starve for 3 days. She was forced to drink tea while she fed hot dogs to her dog. I made dinner at home and invited her over, and I told her that all the leftovers were hers to take home. She turned me down. Sorry, if you're turning down free food, I don't believe that you're starving. When I brought this up, she said, "Why should I drive to your place when you can just order me pizza? I'm doing what I can to save money. Why should I have to eat at home to save money while paying for DoorDash for someone else?" I didn't get any dog food for her dog. Honestly, I didn't get things were that bad. Her hot water heater leaked and flooded her garage. She complained that I wasn't there to clean up, nor did I do anything to help her with her hot water heater replacement. I used to do apartment maintenance and hot water replacements were frequent, but installing it for her wasn't enough. She believed that I should also buy a new one for her. She complained that I didn't do any yard work. First, she never even asked me to. Second, it isn't my yard, so why would it be my responsibility? Finally, why am I going to spend my week working and then go to her place on the weekend and mow her yard for her? She complained that I allowed her, my woman, to spend her money on a yard service. Not my yard, not my problem. When my lease was up, she invited me to move in with her and pay her rent. She said it would have saved me money. It would not have saved me any money, but would have actually cost me a fortune in yard work, home repairs, groceries, and DoorDash. I've been saving up for a house. She's thrown this at me, said that it was a mistake for me to do so, explaining that if I can't afford her, then I can't afford a house. I'm looking at a tiny home, not a palace. She decided that my company should be making training videos. She wanted to be the one hired to make these videos. After insulting me, my boss, and my company, calling us antiquated, she demanded that we book her for videos that no one is asking to be made, and she is also someone with no experience making training videos. She complained that because of me and my cheapness, she's having to sell her motorcycle. The very same motorcycle that I never saw her ride or even touch. The same motorcycle that was covered in cobwebs. I haven't heard from her in over a week. She spent a few days sending me angry texts about how I did her over by not giving her money for anything she asked for. She often complained throughout our entire relationship about how people would just ghost her. I think I know why. She would often complain about how people would not be available on her schedule to help her with her website and web store. We all have jobs. People ghosted her from her company because we can't work 8 hours or more a day for 40 hours or more a week and then deal with her demands. Am I the jerk for returning my daughter's birthday cake after I discovered that my wife had made changes to it? I, 37 male, have a daughter who's now 13, Olivia, from my former relationship. Currently, I'm married to my wife who has a daughter, Brittany, who's 16. So, Brittany is the opposite of Olivia. For example, Brittany is a social kid, Olivia is introverted. The list is long, but they're just the complete opposite. Olivia's 13th birthday was 2 days ago. She loves chocolate, and I decided this is the flavor I was going to go with when I contacted the bakery. However, my wife objected since Brittany absolutely hates chocolate and suggested we go with vanilla. I said no way, because for one, Olivia hates vanilla, and it's also her birthday, so she gets to have her cake with her favorite flavor. My wife got upset and took it as in I had no regard for Brittany and that we should just choose another neutral flavor instead. I shut that down and said no more discussing this because I'd already decided to go with what Olivia wanted. At the day of the birthday, I was supposed to get the cake, but I was surprised to see my wife coming home after picking up the cake from the bakery. I looked at it and discovered that it wasn't a chocolate cake, but a vanilla cake with a small piece of chocolate on top. I got upset, thinking they got my order wrong, and I was about to contact them. But my wife said that there was no mistake and that she called the bakery the day before and made slight changes to the cake to please both of them. I was stunned. I lost it on her and asked her why she did that. She got defensive, saying that birthdays are no excuse to show favoritism and that her daughter is watching and observing how I'm treating both of them. I told her off since I was the one paying, then called the bakery and explained what had happened. I had the cake returned and replaced with a chocolate cake, although this one is smaller, but it was fine. My wife declined to take part in the celebration, and later we got into a huge argument where she called me controlling and selfish for returning the cake instead of using this opportunity to teach Olivia to compromise so that everyone's happy. Now I'm teaching her to be selfish. I said that my daughter gets to act selfish on her birthday, and that she, my wife, was teaching her daughter to be entitled. Word for word, and it led to a bigger argument. We're not talking as of now. Am I the jerk for returning the cake and not taking my wife's input into consideration? Not the jerk. It's Olivia's birthday, not Brittany's birthday. The cake should be the flavor of what the birthday kid wants. This is a special day for Olivia. Therefore, there doesn't really need to be fairness between your daughters. I don't like chocolate, but when it's my sister's birthday, we get chocolate because it's what she likes. I get over it because it's her special day. Your wife is a jerk for going behind your back. The cake was basically vanilla to make Brittany happy, with tiny bits of chocolate for the birthday girl. Why can't Brittany learn to compromise? She's older, and she should know that she can't get what she wants on a day that's not her birthday. Not the jerk. But OP, do you see the red flags? A birthday cake is for the person whose birthday it is. It's not selfish or demeaning to get the person's favorite flavor. Your stepdaughter could have had a vanilla cupcake. But no, your wife made the point to go behind your back and to change it for her daughter. Your wife talks about how her daughter is observing how you treat her. So your daughter doesn't matter? Your daughter could see a stepmom who doesn't give a hoot about her. Hypocrisy much? You did well in changing the cake, but you have way bigger problems in your home. The fact that she did this so flagrantly tells me that she's been messing with you for a while. You probably just now caught on to it. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his wife? Please let us know. I don't know how anyone could not like chocolate cake. Then again, I don't know how anyone couldn't like vanilla either. They're both just so good. Won a lawsuit against a guy who tried to force me out of business because I broke his local monopoly. I'm 26 years old, and I decided to open my own business this year. Moving forward in this post, I should point out that I am from a small town of about 1,000 people in the rural Midwest. Because of this, everyone has some sort of connection with someone. We went to one of the liquor stores in the closest city about 30 minutes away, in a small city of 8,000 people. When we were grabbing some drinks for a party, I was looking at the prices and saw how insane the prices were. For a 6-pack of local beer, we were charged $15. I was thinking about this and figured that I could probably make bank opening a liquor store. Back in February, I was furious about my crappy job and thinking out loud how cool it would be to own my own business to a friend. My friend's mom happened to be the president of the local bank. He told me, "Hey, with the lockdown, the bank has been struggling to find customers to give out loans. Right now, the bank is giving loans for cheap." A couple of weeks later, I went in and met with my friend's mom, and I pitched my idea with the research I had done on alcohol prices, potential demand, and estimated income. I got the loan at a fantastic interest rate. I bought a building, which happened to be the former bank, and hired my dad to help me renovate the building. My dad is a general contractor, and he gave me an excellent quote on materials and labor. After working everything out with the distributors, getting the proper licenses, and getting my paperwork I needed for the government, I was ready to open my liquor store in May. I had started taking out ads in the local newspaper advertising my store and my prices. When I was in talk with my distributors, I learned, even with inflation and everything else, the liquor stores in this city had like an 80% markup. I talked to a local business owner, and he suggested that I have around a 35 to 40% markup. Because of this, I was significantly cheaper than the closest liquor store, and I had a much wider selection than the gas stations and small local stores nearby. My hometown is near a national forest, As such, we have a ton of people who come up for weekends for recreational activities year-round. My first week, the week before Memorial Weekend, after opening, I made a $4,000 profit. It was great being my own boss. If someone was rude to me or my girlfriend, "Oh, I'm sorry, you can do your business elsewhere." Did the gang and I run out of drinks? Time to grab my keys, not car keys, the store keys. My apartment is like 2 blocks away, and go to the store. That's not to say that it wasn't difficult running my own business, especially that my only employee was my girlfriend, and we were both working 6 or 7 10 to 12-hour days a week. I was both manager, accountant, and cashier, but it's so much nicer knowing I can tell someone to buzz off for being a jerk. Couple of weeks after Memorial Day, some old guy walks into my store a couple of minutes after I opened. He seemed friendly enough, but eventually he offered to buy my store. I'm not going to say the amount, but it wouldn't have even covered my principal on the loan. I rejected the proposal outright and refused to negotiate the sum higher. He walked out of my store saying, "Well, you'll be sorry you rejected that offer." The next month, a guy walked into my store and asked if I was the owner. After saying yes, I was informed that my business was being sued by this random guy I had never heard of for libel. After he left, I was freaking out, and I decided that I was going to close early. When I got home, I Googled the guy and soon saw a picture of the guy that tried to buy my store. It turns out that this is the guy who owns both of the liquor stores in the nearby city. It also just so happens that he's on the city council. With a little bit of further digging, I learned that this city has an ordinance that reads, "Any business institution that does not fulfill the definition of a restaurant, tavern, or liquor dispensary will be excluded from obtaining a license for the sale of alcohol." Later, I discovered that the same guy happens to be the head of the board which approves liquor licenses. I love small-town corruption. Either way, I had a major issue. My maternal uncle happens to be a lawyer in a neighboring state. I decided to call him and try to get some legal advice. I talked to him and read the documents that I had been handed and served over the phone, and the research I had done. After receiving all the information I had read off, I was expecting to get some sort of advice, but instead heard, "Hang on, I gotta make a call," and he hung up. I'm freaking out. I was actually about to post my first post to r/legal advice. I'll be honest, I just wanted someone to tell me it was going to be okay, and I didn't need to crawl to this guy on my hands and knees. As I was writing the title, my uncle called back. "Hey OP, I just got off the phone with my partner. He agreed that we can take your case pro bono. If you would like to accept, we can discuss at my office tomorrow at 1 o'clock. This is how I learned that my uncle is on the bar in 3 states. So we meet and we discuss the case. It turns out the guy had filed the libel suit against my business based on the ads I took out in the local newspapers. He claimed that my ads were targeted to damage his and his business reputation. There were a few other things that I had no idea what was being referenced, but Uncle assured me that we would win this case no problem. 3 weeks later, the case is dismissed, but after my uncle says, "People like that guy will likely try to file another suit against you. If that happens, call me, and I promise I'll help." The next day, I get served again, but this time, I'm the defendant. Not my store, me. I swear, I look at the documentation, and the only thing that changed was instead of my business name, mine is listed as the defendant. Same thing happens. 4 weeks later, the case is dismissed. Over the next 3 months, I was sued just as many times. Before the 5th case's hearing, we had a settlement meeting. My uncle, the judge, the guy suing me, his lawyer, a bailiff, and I were sitting in this room. Judge says, "You two have been in court 4 times already. Is there any way we can come to an agreement that'll stop this cycle of faulty litigation?" The guy's lawyer says they have an offer and hand it to my uncle, who then hands it to me. It essentially read that he'll stop all litigation if I sell my business for about 30% of the remaining loan principal. I outright rejected the offer and I made a counteroffer. I said, "If you drop this case, I won't sue you for harassment." He busts out laughing. "Sue me? With what money? The legal fees alone ought to have drained you. You should be happy I chose to extend this offer and not sue you into bankruptcy and buy that place from the bank when they foreclose on you." The judge, the bailiff, and the guy's own lawyer were all looking at him aghast for saying the silent part out loud about the real reason I was getting sued. My uncle straight out said to him, "Oh, I'm sorry. Apparently you were never told. I have taken all of my nephew's cases pro bono. The only money he has spent on your litigations is gas. And bluntly, sir, I think your outburst has just ensured a suit against you." After that, we just left, and I was then informed a few days later the litigation was dropped. Right then, my uncle and I are talking about the future suit against the guy. I want to sue the guy for a very high amount to try and get press attention on this guy and his sketchy actions. Although my uncle warned me that we'll need to be careful because if we set the damages too high, it'll look like we're just being vindictive. This suit won't be pro bono, but after getting sued 5 times for free essentially, I'm not going to complain. Looking back on this, I'm so thankful that my friends and family supported the entire way, especially my uncle. Without my uncle, I would have absolutely lost my business. You're going to school me? Please do. Okay, so I'm born and raised in the US and have always had a fascination with Ireland. I do have Irish ancestry, but my family has never been one to be vocal about it. We didn't do the stereotypical Irish-American St. Patrick's Day stuff, hang Irish flags, or put Irish blessings on the wall. I guess I got my love for Ireland looking through books. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents when I was younger, and they had a set of books about different countries. I would spend all day looking through the one on Ireland. The gorgeous landscapes, the stone walls, the cottages, it all fascinated me. When I was around 4, my grandparents, knowing my fascination with Ireland, gave me an illustrated book of Irish legends as a birthday gift, and it quickly became my favorite book of all time. I would always ask them to read me stories from it, and my favorite was the story of Tir na Nog. As I got older, my interest in Irish history and culture never waned, and I was determined to make it over there one day, and I'm happy to say I have accomplished that goal many times over now. Many of my friends there are like family to me, and we keep in close contact. Now, this was over a decade ago, but one weekend, a friend and I were just grabbing some lunch and drinks at a local pub, and he was asking me about places to see in Ireland because I had just gotten back from there the previous week. I named a few spots, and this guy on the other side of me, who is old enough to be my dad, decides to butt in. Him. Have you ever been to Ireland? He said with a tone that suggests I have no business giving my friend advice on the subject. Me. Yes. Him. How many times? Once? Me. Twice. Him. Oh. Throws up his hands in a mock surprise. Why don't we sit at one of the tables here, and I can school you on Ireland? I smile and happily comply by getting down from my bar stool and sitting in a chair at the little table behind us. As he walks over to the table, I start speaking in Irish. He looks at me as if I've got 3 heads. I decide to start throwing some of his own shade back at him, and I say it again, more slowly, still speaking in Irish. Now, one of the things that I did before my first trip was take Irish language classes at our local Irish Cultural Center. The classes were taught by a woman who was a native speaker. I had also made a lot of friends with native speakers from West Kerry and Galway from my trips there, and they helped me with my Irish. He still stands there clueless, so with casual sarcasm I say, "Oh, I figured that since you were about to school me on Ireland, it would only be fitting that we have the conversation in Irish. Certainly an expert such as yourself would have no trouble with that." The look of defeat on his face was priceless. The condescending attitude quickly disappeared like the air escaping a deflating balloon. His shoulders drooped and he hung his head as he walked away without saying a word. My friend laughed and we went back to our conversation. I've made 5 more trips to Ireland in the years since then, and the only disappointing part of any of it is not being able to stay longer. Am I the jerk for ending game night early after catching my friend snooping through my bedroom? My husband and I have a game night every few weeks with a few friends at our house, and everything was going as usual when one of my friends, I'll refer to him as Nick, gets up to go to the bathroom. We all took a short break to wait for Nick to get back, and we talked with each other for a while when we realized that around 25 minutes had passed and Nick hadn't even returned yet, which was odd. I went to go check up on him, but when I go to the bathroom, the door was open and he wasn't in there. I called out his name, but I did not get any response, so I started looking around the house for him. I caught him walking out of my bedroom, and I asked him what he was doing, to which he responded that he had gotten lost. By the way, there is no bathroom connected to my bedroom, so that isn't what he was in there for. I found it hard to believe that he would have gotten lost as, A, my house is not large enough to where someone could get lost for over 25 minutes realistically. B, he had gone to the bathroom during our last game night, which was only a few weeks earlier, and while he could have forgotten where it was then, C, he could have just asked us where the bathroom was. I was starting to get angry at Nick during our conversation because I knew he was lying to me, and I kicked him out of the house. I ended up canceling the rest of the game night after explaining to everyone what happened, since neither me or my husband were in the right mood to continue. After everyone had left, I searched the bedroom to try to figure out what Nick was doing in there, and I realized that he had mostly gone through my dresser as a lot of stuff was misplaced. My friends were upset at me for overreacting and ruining the game night, and they told me that I should give Nick another chance. I told them that I refused to let him come back into my house, and they told me that I was being childish about the situation. So, am I the jerk for kicking Nick out of my house and not giving him another chance? We don't pay you to be 2 minutes late. I've worked at many retail chains, but have had many terrible bosses. Here's one story I think I can give up without any repercussions. At a small, specific retail store, 5 to 6 years ago at this point, I was confronted by my old boss on a specific event that I was late by 2 minutes. Previous day, he had asked me to come in on my day off. I'm at an earlier time than I normally do. I agreed to come in on my day off and work a shift I'm not normally used to, but it's retail. It cannot be that difficult. My old boss asked me to work 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. and I showed up at 7:02 a.m., which in my state, there is a 5-minute window for everyone, and this was 100% not a habit of mine at all. I'm normally one to show up 5 minutes early every day and wait aside the time clock. I clocked on and walked to my department with a drink I had already purchased the previous day. As I walked into the department, the manager greeted me, then said,
"When I schedule you at 7 a.m., I expect you to be in department by 7 a.m., not a minute later. We can't pay you to clock in, buy something, and then start working. Over the course of a year, that adds up to hundreds of dollars of lost labor for one individual."
I told my old boss that my drink was from the previous day and that I just clocked in 2 minutes late. My old boss replied with,
"That's not my problem. You need to plan better. You were scheduled at 7, and we are losing cost of labor each minute you are not here. Be in department at scheduled time."
Which is not true. I spoke regularly with a payroll employee, and she explained to me quite some time prior that the company does not pay you 3 minutes before or after your scheduled time. So if you clock on at 7 a.m., you are not getting paid until 7:03 a.m. If you clock on at 6:57 a.m., you are not getting paid until 7 a.m. Same for when you return from lunch. However, if you clock on at 7:04, after that 3-minute window, you begin getting paid immediately that minute. My boss was right. I need to plan better. I asked for a printout of my timestamps going back as far as they had record of, and I tallied up each day that I had arrived 3 minutes early and did not get paid for it. I counted well over 330 minutes within a 3-month span that I was not getting paid for, which ended up being a little over $110. I gave my old boss a copy and said, "You can pay me for these dates where I was in department on the dot without getting paid for it." My old boss then replied,
"That's not how our company policy works."
He then went into detail to explain to me exactly what I had already known and gave him a copy of. Yet my old boss is now recognizing that he's contradicted himself and willingly lied to me. When everything clicked in his head that he's contradicting himself, it was far too obvious because his face went bright red and he started smiling. In my opinion, like he had been caught. My old boss.
"Well, you know the policy. We can't pay you for that."
Me. Then I will begin my shift when I am getting paid, not the minute you schedule me. It's not like you're losing labor if you're not even paying the employees that window of time. Schedule me at 7 if you like, but I will not be clocking in until 4 minutes after the scheduled time, as you will not be losing any cost of labor for it, and I will not be losing pay over your personal policy. For about 3 weeks, I clocked in 4 minutes late every day, no matter how early I arrived. I eventually got a warning from the building's HR that it's riding the line and very close to getting a write-up and down the discipline road. I explained to her the entire story as she seemingly did not like the manager of mine either. She laughed pretty hard at the whole thing and offered me a department transfer with a higher pay. She reminded me that my behavior was listed under a category that could get me terminated and thought the transfer would be a fresh start. Instead, I put in my 2 weeks notice and thanked her for the wonderful opportunity. The funniest part of all of this, years later I saw my old manager working at a new chain in a similar position to what he was doing when I worked for him. He smiled and waved. I smiled and waved and continued on. As time went on, I also bumped into the old HR manager who was working in an entirely different field. I asked her why my old boss left that company. She laughed and said, "He didn't leave. We fired him for time theft." Apparently, my old boss would take a lunch, leave the building, and never clock out for it. Entitled friend calls her parents toxic because they want her to get a job. My friend and I are both 20. I'm on summer break from college and I have a job at a local grocery store that I work at during the summer. My friend is not in college and doesn't work. She's only ever had one job that she lasted a month at before getting fired for hooking up with a coworker in the bathroom and smoking in the break room. Also, mouthing off to everyone constantly. There were so many complaints against her. She constantly complains to me about how toxic her parents are. They yell at her because she doesn't have a job. She stays up all night with her boyfriend. They're loud. They sleep until 3 to 4 p.m. every day. For not being in college, for always running her mouth at them and screaming at them. She leaves messes everywhere and complains about her parents yelling at her to keep the house clean, stuff like that. Her boyfriend also lives in her room. He does work part-time, 5 p.m. to 1 a.m., and she complains to me that she's lonely when he's at work. She also gets mad at me when I'm on my days off from work for not hanging out with her every single time. I like to have time to myself. She told me that her parents said she has until July 31st to find a job or she's getting kicked out. She's known about this since last month. She keeps using the excuse of having social and driving anxiety, and that's why she can't work. Social anxiety? But she goes to parties. Driving anxiety? She drove to an amusement park that was 4 hours away earlier this year. She also keeps using the excuse that everyone around here is requiring experience. Home Depot isn't, McDonald's isn't, Walmart isn't, senior living places aren't, hotels aren't, most restaurants aren't requiring experience. I went on Indeed, and a lot of places are hiring on the spot, no experience required. When I brought that to her attention, she said she doesn't want to be seen in McDonald's, Walmart, or most places I mentioned, and it's embarrassing. She said only dumb people work there. I told her, well, you can't exactly be picky about where you want to work. You have no experience. You have until July 31st to find a job. Unless you want to be homeless, I would start applying everywhere if I were you. She said both of her parents have master's degrees and make a lot of money. There's no reason for her to work, and they are being unfair. I told her that they worked hard to get their master's degrees, and that's not a good attitude to have. Don't you want to eventually be able to move out and have your own money? She said no, she doesn't want to move out into a crappy apartment, and she likes her parents' massive house. I said, well, if you don't get a job, you won't be living there much longer, and she started yelling at me. She asked if she can stay with me if she gets kicked out, and I said no, that won't be happening, because I will be going back to college in August. She started yelling at me and calling me names. Also, she's called my parents' house trash before, so why would she even want to live there? She sent me videos of her screaming at her parents because they won't give her money when we do hang out. She wants me to pay for her. I don't pay for her and suggest free things which she doesn't like. She calls me a cheap jerk, and I tell her to get a job if she wants to do things she can't afford. She then starts screaming and complaining about her parents being toxic. She doesn't think she should have to clean around the house and that it's their house. If they want it clean, then hire a maid. I said, but you live there rent-free and you're home all the time. The least you could do is some light cleaning and keep your personal space clean. I work and I have to keep my room clean and do chores around the house. And she said, that's because your parents are poorer than mine. Mine can hire a maid. If I was in her position and I didn't want to be in the streets, I would be applying everywhere, and I would be grateful that my parents haven't kicked me out yet. Numerous people have stopped being her friend because she's so mean and dumps all of her issues on them and constantly plays the victim. It's never her. They are always the problem. She just says that they're terrible people, their loss, and moves on. She doesn't care. She also makes fun of me because I've never had a boyfriend, and she always brags about her boyfriend in their life. She also thinks it's weird because I don't like to get drunk and go to parties. I just don't like parties. They aren't my thing. She said she can't wait until she turns 21 because then she gets to go to clubs. Apparently, I seriously do question myself why I'm friends with her a lot, and I can't wait to go back to college to get away from her. I go to college out of state, so I don't have to deal with her for most of the year. I mean, she does reach out, but I don't respond that often because I'm busy. Am I the jerk for getting mad at my girlfriend for destroying my farm? Backstory. I, 22, male, and my girlfriend, 24, female, have been together for 6 years. We both like video games, but I play more than her for the following reasons. 1. She gets nauseous while playing games that have a lot of camera movement. 2. She doesn't have a lot of time. She works about 60 hours a week. 3. She doesn't purchase games. She has to help her family with bills. We've been wanting to play together for a long time, so I tried helping her. I gave her my Xbox a few years ago, and last year I bought her a laptop and shared my Steam account with her. But again, she hasn't been able to play because of the reasons mentioned earlier. Story. I bought a game called Stardew Valley for myself a couple years ago, but didn't make time to play it until I realized it had multiplayer in it, so I thought it was the perfect game for us, and it is. I told her about it, and she didn't think it was good because it didn't look as pretty as Animal Crossing. But as soon as we started playing, we fell in love with it. We play maybe once or twice every week for about 1 or 2 hours. I really like the game and wanted to play longer. So a couple of weeks ago, I told her that I was going to create a new save file so I could play by myself. And she said, "Sure, no problem. I'll do the same when I have time." So I did just that. I played on my new save file when I was alone and played with her on our shared save file when she was available. The issue began this week. She came to my house as I was playing, and she saw that I was advancing really fast and I had a lot of things already. She got angry, and I told her that it had nothing to do with our farm and that I still enjoyed playing with her, and I thought that was it. Yesterday, she was in my room, and I went to the kitchen to make dinner. But when I came back to the room, I saw that she literally destroyed my farm. My crops were gone, my animals were gone, my buildings were destroyed, and I had no money, so a lot of hours getting those things were wasted. She had already saved, so I couldn't fix it. Of course, it's not the end of the world, but I was really upset, so I yelled at her. She screamed back, saying that I was supposed to play with her and that I left her behind. I told her that it was not a competition and that I was just enjoying the game. I wanted to play with her and play separately on my own farm. That is why I created 2 farms. I just gave her dinner and told her not to speak to me, and we went to sleep like that. Today, she apologized and told me that she wants to play, but I told her that I don't want to play with her anymore. Heck, I don't even want to play Stardew Valley anymore. Am I the jerk for getting mad and refusing to play with her anymore? I can understand her frustration because she doesn't have a lot of free time, but on the other hand, she destroyed something of mine just to hurt me. My aunt borrowed my college fund and never paid it back. I, 25 female, have always been really close to my cousin, D, who's 22 male. He had a harder time growing up because his parents had some financial difficulties. He never went to bed hungry, but they didn't have much money left for luxuries. My uncle met his wife in a dance club where she was working as a dancer. No one in the family knows this, but she left that line of work when she got married. They have a business, which D works for, that struggled for years, but was one of the businesses that became vital during lockdown, so things really turned around for them, and now they're making bank. This means that a few months back, my cousin could have an amazing wedding and a 2-month-long worldwide honeymoon. I was really happy and proud for him. I grew up solidly middle class. Nothing lavish, but we did have some things that some would consider luxuries. My parents, however, were not in a position to pay for college for me, which I was chill about, and I got loans. I've been working for 2 years, and I still live with my parents while I pay off the loans. I, unfortunately, couldn't get my master's because it wasn't financially viable. Last weekend was my birthday party, and my cousin showed up without a gift. His wife made a comment, jokingly, about how they can't afford anything after spending all their money on their wedding. None of this bothered me because gifts are not an expectation, but my dad was visibly upset. I asked him about this, and he opened a can of worms. It turned out that I used to have a healthy college fund until my mom secretly lent it to my aunt and uncle to help them save their business when I was 15. The agreement was that as soon as they were able, they would pay it back to my mom. They haven't returned a dime. They have, in the last 3 years, bought a second house, flown first class overseas twice, and paid for Dee's wedding and honeymoon. Their excuse is that I'm now done with college, and their son works hard, so he deserves it more. My father got so annoyed at my aunt while relaying this to me that he decided to kick them out. While trying to calm him down, I said, "We both know she only thinks about herself and Dee. If she had any class, she wouldn't dress like she's still a certain type of dancer that she used to be." I was so preoccupied, I didn't realize that my entire family had quietly walked up with the candles lit, ready to sing to me, and they heard everything. My aunt left and has since sent my mom a message that we will never be seeing that money as it is now compensation for her pain and suffering. I didn't mean to out her and be so rude. I was dealing with a lot of emotions and shock over this, and I still am. My family doesn't know why we were so angry, so they just think I'm a jerk, and I don't want to tell them the whole story. But I'm not sure if it's excusable either way, so am I the jerk? Updates and answers. My cousin asked me to meet him alone this morning. It turned out that he knew nothing about it at all. His mom has been keeping it quiet. He took this week to consult with a lawyer to figure out how much they owed. He's also recently uncovered 2 other things. Firstly, the business has been evading tax, so he's very glad we didn't take legal action. He started the process to come clean and to pay that back. Secondly, she also borrowed money from my grandparents, a decent amount, which she never even paid back. They have since passed on, so the lawyer said that amount will form part of the estate and will be owed between the 3 siblings. My cousin offered to sell his house to pay in full immediately if need be, but as an alternative, he and his lawyer have created a payment plan that would pay for my masters immediately. They will take over my loan repayments immediately. Once it is paid, they will continue paying my mom back monthly until the total is settled. We will obviously be going with the plan where he doesn't lose his home. Despite my cousin and his lawyers seeming fair, they've both advised me to find my own lawyer for my mom's interests, and they've offered to pay for that also. Because of the age of the loan and lack of effort to collect on my mom's side, they could legally contest it, or some of it, but my cousin won't be doing that. My cousin apologized to me profusely and said that he wouldn't ask me to keep this secret from the family, but appreciates that I kept it to myself and hopes we can continue that as long as he upholds the agreement we make. Not the jerk. You acted from emotions, and to be honest, your aunt is a jerk. Do whatever you can to get that money back. Use the text your aunt sent to sue. People like that are horrid. You could still get a master's if you wanted to. They stole it from you. Low-key think your mom is too, since she lent the money in secret initially and is probably a big reason your dad hasn't pushed for payback. You're the jerk. I hope you never get back a dime of that money. People like you who judge others like your aunt, y'all disgust me, like for real. Do you even know how it feels to be judged like that? My parents always judged me for the line of work I went into, and as a result, I went no contact with them. Even my brothers have chimed in about how my line of work will make me undesirable to marry. Joke's on them. I can make $1,000 a night on good nights because actual real men with real money think I'm pretty desirable. Do I wish I had a husband and kids and a house with a white picket fence? I mean, sure, it would be nice. But I live my life in the fast lane because it's what I chose. I'm a YOLO girl for life. Take me as I am or miss me as I was. Do better. YOLO girl for life. It's probably one of the funniest things I've ever heard. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or their aunt? Please let us know. You take my college fund, you can bet your backside I'm getting it back. You will come in when this warehouse opens. I used to work in a warehouse, and one day we got a new floor manager. He had this grand idea that he was going to make an already functional supply warehouse work even better. It's important to note that all of our deliveries were sent out on time, received on time, no workplace accidents other than the occasional stubbed toe or splinter from a wooden box. This place ran about as smoothly and efficiently as possible, but it wasn't good enough for the new manager. He made it a point to check on everyone, getting into things that weren't his business and things he didn't even know about. One of his biggest things was making sure that everyone was at work on time. We didn't have a time clock, we just wrote down when we got in and when we left. The new manager insisted that a punch card system would work much better for us, but the owners weren't willing to invest in that. So, new manager would spend every morning watching everyone come through the front door. We had maybe 50 people who worked there, so he made sure to count who came in and when. Anyone who walked in the door past 8:05 a.m. got written up. This is when he met the old guy. Old guy had been with the company pretty much since it opened. He knew everything and everyone there. Great guy and everyone liked him. On the second or third day of new manager watching everyone come in, he sees old guy walking in the front doors at 8:15. New manager rips into old guy, telling him that he was late, that it was unacceptable, and that he was getting written up. He's yelling in the middle of the warehouse where everyone can see and hear him. Old guy tries to explain, but he gets told to shut up. New manager tops this all off with an order. This warehouse opens at 8 a.m. sharp every day, 5 days a week, and I expect you at that door at 8 a.m. to begin your shift. You will be here when the warehouse opens. Is that understood? Old guy just kinda smiles, takes the paperwork, and apologizes, stating that he would be in tomorrow at 8 a.m. just as he was told. The smug look on the new manager's face was picture perfect. He was certain that he had just fixed the biggest flaw in the company. The next day at 8 a.m. sharp, old guy walked through the door and simply made sure that he was seen. Then he went off into the warehouse. That day was a nightmare. Orders backed up. Trucks were waiting on paperwork. New manager is almost in tears because of the chaos. The owner comes in and starts trying to make sense of the situation with new manager, and they track the paperwork issue back to the old guy. New manager is upset, but owner is concerned and asked old guy if everything is okay. Old guy just tries to hide his embarrassment, saying that new manager wrote him up the day before, and he was told that he had to come in at 8 a.m., not at 4 a.m. like he always did to get all the orders and paperwork ready for the day. The day before, when he walked in the door, he had been coming in from a break. New manager tried to backpedal, saying he didn't know, that it was old guy's fault. Owner knew better. After that, the new manager wasn't working at the warehouse anymore, or for the company. He went off to become a new manager for someplace else. Thankfully, old guy knew what was going to happen and had most of the paperwork done for the day already, so we weren't too behind when the smoke cleared. That's not my lawnmower. So I think this falls into this category, but it all started with me purchasing a lawnmower at a big box hardware store. In the interest of keeping them anonymous, let's just call them Rob Lowe, or Lowe's for short. I walked in one day looking to finally purchase a new mower, and I was in luck as they had a smoking deal on a display model. Unprepared to be going home with a new mower that day, I didn't bring my truck, so I simply asked if I could set it aside and come back in a little bit with my truck. I returned maybe 30 minutes later and picked up my mower and headed home. This should be the end of the story, but weirdly it isn't. Fast forward about 2 weeks later, and I get a call from Lowe's informing me that my mower is ready for pickup. Confused, I replied, "Pardon me?" So they reminded me that I ordered a mower about 2 weeks ago and it just arrived and it's awaiting pickup. Now I know most people would have seized the opportunity right there, but I decided to be a good person and I explained to the employee that no, I didn't order a mower. I bought a floor model and set it aside to pick up later, which I did. The employee thanks me, apologizes for the confusion, and says he'll update the order. Well, 1 week later they call again. Same thing, and I once again explain why it's not mine. They did this once a week for 3 weeks straight, and after the third time I tell the wife, I swear if they call me again, I'm going to go pick up my mower. At this point, now I'm just excited. I'm watching my phone, hoping they'll call. Because in my mind, I've earned it at this point, and I want my free mower. Well, lo and behold, week 4 hits, and guess who calls? I'm now ready to accept my free mower, but I'm also unsure how this is going to play out. I don't know if it's paid for. I don't have a receipt. It seems like a long shot. So I simply tell the employee I'm so sorry I haven't been in yet to get it, but I got called out of town for work and just got back, and with that said, I have no idea where I put the receipt. The employee kindly replies, "Oh, no worries, it's paid in full, so all you need is a photo ID matching the name on the order." Perfect. I call the wife to let her know I'm going to pick up our new mower. She just laughs, still positive that once I get there, they won't have a mower to give me. But you'll be happy to know that I pull in, tell customer service I'm here for my mower, show them my ID, and next thing you know, some guy on a tow truck is loading a brand new, in-the-box, unassembled mower into the back of my truck, and off I go. Still have that mower today. I thought about returning the original afterwards, but I just got nervous it would somehow raise the alarms. Then I was going to sell it on Marketplace, but shortly after all this, I had bought a new house and my best friend put in a lot of hours helping me move, and he too had been looking for a new mower, so I just gave it to him instead as a thanks for helping me. I still ended up with a brand new mower for essentially 60% off, and then was able to pay for movers with the original one, so it was still a win-win. I genuinely tried telling them it wasn't my mower, but they insisted that it was, and it would be rude to refuse their offer. I can't do this kind of thing. I know it's stealing, even if it's human error. You took something you know wasn't yours to have. Wow, some people are really upset about you stealing from a company with $40 billion? Who gives a hoot? Justify it however you need to in your own mind, but it's still theft and you know it. Bring on all the downvotes. Well, what do you think? Did OP do anything wrong or not? Please let us know. You should fire us. Okay, my family runs a small trucking company. Depending on where you are in the world, you might call us a P&D company, a final mile company, or a white glove company. Basically, we handle the kind of stuff that you might buy to have delivered to your home or business that's too big for someone like UPS to deliver, but not big enough for a tractor trailer to haul, and or stuff that actually needs to be brought into the home and set up, like furniture, appliances, etc. A lot of what we've hauled away over the years is stuff going to small stores that can't take delivery by large truck, construction sites where large trucks can't get in and out, neighborhoods and apartment complexes. We don't work for the people buying this stuff, we work for the people selling or shipping it. But as we tend to see the same business owners a lot, we've developed great relationships with them over the years. We don't get rich, but we've been pretty comfortable over the years. Our one major stressor has been a long-time shipper who has, or rather had, become increasingly demanding as time went on. Now when I say long time, I mean it. We made our first delivery for them over 50 years ago. Our company has been doing business with them longer than any of the current employees or management staff have been there. There was one point, not too long ago, where the retired guy who came in a few hours a day to sweep our warehouse because he was bored sitting at home literally knew more about this shipper's systems than their senior field rep, who was supposed to be supervising our operations. We have been a small but a vital part of their network for so long that almost no one there really realized how much we did for them. We've seen field reps come and go. Some have been great, some have been a little challenging, but most have, once they realized what was going on, largely left us alone to do our jobs. One even called when he took over our area to ask who we were, because his predecessor had no notes on us at all, because they'd never had to visit. We've just been, mostly, quietly plugging along, taking care of their customers, in some cases for generations. Well, the latest rep was a genuinely unpleasant person. He was arrogant, abrasive, casually insulted our employees. Honestly, it's not worth getting into the minutiae here. He wasn't someone we wanted to work with, but I'm able to put on a happy face and get along with just about anyone, when needs must, so onward we strode. As I said earlier, the shipper had been getting more and more demanding as time went on. Systems had been getting harder to navigate, inventory had been getting harder to track, phone trees had grown into banyan nightmares, more and more layers of bureaucracy had been added, and with every single change, they had grown less agile, slower, more difficult to deal with. One day, the field rep called because he didn't like how we had answered an email. Not that we hadn't answered it, just that he didn't like the manner in which it had been answered. After decades of dealing with this shipper, being micromanaged to that level was not something that we were interested in. The manager here who was dealing directly with him tried to defuse the situation, but it kept getting worse until the field rep said, "If you aren't happy with the way things are going, maybe you should just quit." Oh, okay then. We started running the numbers, looked at all our other businesses, decided that we could, indeed, go on without them, and then I called the field rep to have a frank conversation with him. And then I wrote a short, polite, direct letter to our customer of over 50 years telling them that we were firing them. We didn't just pull the plug. We gave them a full 60 days notice so they'd have time to get something else worked out. And they didn't. We've always been here for them. They've never had to worry about it. They had someone they thought was going to be a replacement, but, well, as of today, most of their customers in this area haven't had deliveries for a week. Some longer than that. Many don't know when they'll get their next shipment. That field rep might still have a job when all is said and done, but it's not our problem anymore. Our phone keeps ringing, people looking for their freight from that shipper. Sorry, you'll have to call them. Crappy bosses mess around and find out. I had a job working warehouse and delivery for a store. The entire corporate structure was built on treating the people below you like dirt, and that was passed down through every level. Managers would just bark orders and complain at you for any reason they could think of. They paid about 25 cents over minimum wage, and the bosses drove BMWs and Mercedes. The big boss lived in an $8 million house. Our store was the freight hub for 4 others in the little chain, so we got to know the drivers from the other stores well, as they were always coming to load freight or drop stuff off. One day, we're sitting with 2 drivers from another store, and Buddy remarks that he and his partner are working over 60 hours a week. I say he must be doing okay with all that overtime pay. He says they're not getting overtime, just paid a straight time rate. I asked him if he signed an averaging agreement. He says no. He shows me his pay stub, and there it is. His partner comes back and confirms all of this, and they've been doing it for months. He had asked his manager about overtime and been told that straight pay was just the way it worked. I tell them that's illegal and urge them to take it to the labor relations. They're reluctant to rock the boat, figuring they'll be fired, So I drop it. We never got any overtime. Our warehouse was busy, our store was not. A couple months later, they're in again, and Buddy's partner tells us he and his girlfriend are moving back east, and he's giving his notice. I tell him again to file a complaint. Nothing to lose now, so he does. A few weeks go by, and when I come in one day, there are expensive boss cars parked all over the loading dock. My workmate says something big is going down. All the managers have been summoned and are inside with a bunch of people in suits. So we wander upstairs to see what's going on. The company bookkeeper had an office in our store and handled all of the payroll. He was a Chinese immigrant, a nice guy. The bosses were trying to pin this on him, saying he didn't speak English very well, which was true, and had obviously messed everything up. Turns out he was a pretty cagey guy. He knew what they had told him to do was illegal and was able to produce all the records of him telling them that and of them telling him to basically just shut up and do it. He hands it all over and quits. I see Buddy with a new partner a few weeks later. He's got a pay stub for about 15 paychecks worth of earnings. Company got caught for all the overtime pay and a pretty substantial fine on top of that. Added bonus, the second in command had driven over a nail when he parked his silver BMW on the loading dock and had a flat when he came out of the store. He opened his trunk and called me over and said, "Change that for me." I told him, "Sorry, that's not my job, and if I hurt myself, my compensation claim would be denied." As he went in to call a tow truck, I stood on the loading dock and gazed upon all of the havoc I had wrought, and my heart was glad. Am I the jerk for being incredibly mean to my neighbor? I'm 30, female. Not going to go into detail, but my nephew, Luke, who's 10, has very angry and aggressive behavior. I know what's going on with him and I'm working on it. I have custody of my nephew, and I know I said that we're working on it, but it's really hard. I love him to bits, but I think I've cried more in this past year than I ever have before. My neighbor is convinced that I have to be more strict and discipline him better. That's really not the case, but I simply tell her that I'll keep her advice in mind and try to avoid her. But yesterday was one of the harder days, and I had confiscated one of my nephew's toys until he calmed down. It was a superhero action figure. I went out on the porch for a breather while he napped, and I didn't realize it, but I had brought the toy out with me. I was sitting on the steps and the toy was next to me. My neighbor pops up out of nowhere after telling me that the kid needs more discipline for the 100th time, and she grabbed the toy. I was confused and asked if I could have it back. She told me that he and I will be better off without it. After all, actions have consequences. I told her that I don't care, and I'd like for her to give me that toy back. She patted me on the shoulder and said she knows it's hard, but it'll work out in the end, and was gonna walk away with it, but I ended up yelling at her. I said, "OMG, give it back, or else I'll call the police and tell them that you, a 60-something-year-old lady, stole from a little kid." She gasped and was like, "I'm not 60-something, I'm still in my 40s. Keep in mind, she still has the toy. I just went, "You look 60 to me." I kid you not, this woman starts crying, and after giving, or throwing, the toy back, she called me incredibly rude and ran into her house. Her partner called me later to apologize, but asked if I could apologize as well since what I said was pretty rude. I told them I'd think about it. Now I'm wondering if I'm the jerk for how I reacted. I did exaggerate her age to insult her, which was pretty mean of me, but she literally stole the toy and refused to give it back until I did. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. What kind of grown woman tries to steal a kid's toy? The jerk kind, that's who. Keep doing what you're doing. Luke might not appreciate it at the time, but as an adult, he'll probably be able to look back and be thankful for you. I'll come back, so long as Larry isn't there. Got permission to share this from my buddy who's a software engineer. Background. To give you some background on my friend Tim, made up name, he's been programming since he was like 7 years old. Tim said by the time he got to college, he breezed through most of his computer science classes because a lot of the content that they were covering he had already mastered years prior. Tim is an excellent programmer. Tim's career has been quite successful. He's worked for Google, Facebook, Amazon, and finally a hedge fund. The story starts at the hedge fund. Tim works a lot with AI technology, and at this hedge fund, he was the lead programmer manager who spearheaded an effort to optimize their AI that helped them complete literally millions of trades a day. To say his work had a massive impact was an understatement. All of this is going on with lockdown in the background. Due to lockdown, they went to a work-from-home model, where my friend Tim kept working. During the work from home, Tim was looking around his fancy $4,500 a month New York City apartment and wished for things like a yard, a heated pool, a nice 3-car garage, and not living in a high-rise. It dawned on Tim that he could leave New York City. Tim moves to Michigan. So Tim moved back to his hometown in Michigan, where he bought himself a really nice home with a heated pool, a 3-car garage, a nice yard, and guess what the yard had in it? A mother-in-law suite, which was essentially a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, second home on the property of his main home, which he turned into his man cave. It's actually pretty sick. Oh yeah, and his mortgage payment was far less than his $4.5 thousand a month rent, like half. Tim spent the rest of his lockdown work from home pounding out projects, etc. He never actually informed his employer on an official basis that he moved. He just kept working. Then lockdown ended. Lockdown is finally over. Back to the office, or? Tim's boss, Larry, calls him up and goes, "All right, Tim, on Monday we're starting work back at the office." And Tim goes, "Yeah, about that. I moved to Michigan." Larry is shocked and goes, "You didn't even ask if you could do that." And Tim basically said, "I didn't know I needed your permission to move," in a very sarcastic way. Larry insists that Tim needs to move back to New York City or he won't have a place on the team. Tim says he's been doing the exact same work from home at a high level for the past year. He's willing to travel to New York City for a few meetings a year on his own dime, but he feels like his quality of life is so much higher outside of New York City, he has no desire to go back. To which Larry said that if Tim doesn't have any desire to live in New York City, then he has no desire to keep Tim employed. Now, dear Reddit, what do you think a talented senior programmer with over a decade of experience who specializes in AI technology is going to say to a response like that? If you're thinking he quit, you'd be absolutely right, he quit. Maintaining complex code can be hard. Now, anyone that's done any programming knows that sometimes the best person to maintain the code is the person who wrote the code. There's logic, there's thought processes. There's so much that goes into programming that can be so individualistic, it can be hard for someone to take over a code base they didn't write. John, the CEO, enters the picture. 6 weeks go by when John calls Tim. John is the CEO of the hedge fund. John gets Tim to agree to consider coming back, so that's when John suggests they fly Tim to New York City and he sits down with John. Tim, however, flipped the switch and said, "No, how about you fly out to Michigan and we discuss this?" Tim said he said that because he wanted to establish if he was going to come back, it was going to be him, working from Michigan. And if he was going to talk to his employment, it was going to be done in Michigan. John agreed and 2 days later flew out to meet with Tim. Tim sits down and John says they really need him because he provided a lot of value to the organization and the programming team is struggling. John offers Tim the opportunity to come back with a 20% pay cut since he won't be living in New York City, and John called that a cost of living adjustment, to which Tim said, "No, I want a 15% raise above what I was earning." John sits back and responds, "The reason we pay what we pay is because we ask you to live in New York City, and we understand that's an expensive city to live in." To which Tim says, "You pay what you pay, and you pay it because I'm worth it. If I wasn't worth what you pay, you wouldn't be paying me. Now, my first condition is, if you want me back, it'll be a 15% raise." John goes, "And the second?" "The second condition is, I'll come back so long as Larry isn't there." John sighs, "You're asking for too much." To which Tim goes, "You don't need to bring me back if you don't want to. I'll be fine elsewhere." John goes, "I'll talk to the partners." Tim says, "My offer is good till Friday." John goes, "What do you mean?" Tim, "Next Monday is when I'm going to start looking for work. This offer is good until Friday." It was Tuesday. John leaves. That Thursday, the phone rings. It's John. In conclusion, "Tim, we're transferring Larry to a different fund. He won't be working with you anymore, and we're fine with giving you a 15% raise. Can we send you an offer letter for you to sign?" Tim said, "Of course. And Larry is really gone?" John, "Yes, you will never need to interact with Larry ever again." That was at the start of this year. Tim hasn't been to New York City, hasn't heard from Larry, hasn't seen Larry on any communications, etc. You want your forgery document sent to court? Sure. I work at a translation office. Our job is basically to translate official documents, work certificates, academic degrees, medical papers, etc., to be used in other countries. The whole service is controlled and monitored by the judiciary, and we are basically under their direct supervision. My boss had to be directly certified by the court. Some countries also require our translation to be double certified by the local court and/or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's pretty routine work most of the time, but since these are official documents, there are a lot of rules we have to follow, like what documents can be issued at official translation and how much we are allowed to charge, down to the smallest pennies. My boss is usually a super cool guy and does all he can to help people who come in, sometimes even refusing pay from people who can't afford it, even though he still has to pay the tax for the income since it gets registered in the system. Now, this is actually something my boss did. I fully agreed with him, but it wasn't my call to make. Last week, some guy, let's call him Mr. X, comes in and brings us a bunch of documents to translate, including work certificates, his academic diploma, and transcript of his grades, and some other stuff. He brought them in 2 batches, so by the time we received the second set of documents, his first was already translated and double certified by the court and Ministry of Foreign Affairs. His grade transcripts were in the first batch. His diploma was in the second batch. This will be important later. At first, he refused to give us his diploma, saying that his mother had hidden the document to prevent him from traveling abroad. Not the strangest thing we've heard, so whatever. But we kindly inform him that we are not allowed to issue a translation of copies and have to at least see the original document. So does the court and the ministry. So he goes and gets it a couple of days later. Now, as I was the one in charge of his translations, and the moment I picked up his diploma, something felt off. It was too heavy. I actually had to check several times to make sure it wasn't 2 or 3 documents stuck together. A closer examination showed that a post stamp attached to the back was not real, but instead a copy. Strange. I call my boss, since now I'm sure this is a forgery. He comes, checks the document, but it's really strange. These documents have foreign prevention measures like holograms, UV light-sensitive prints, and most of them are in order except the stamp in the back and the fact that the photocopy looks strange. At this point, I just suggested calling the cops and letting them deal with it. But my boss, the good guy that he is, didn't want to get the guy in trouble and said he wasn't 100% sure, more like 90% sure. So he had someone bring it to the court to check, but instructed that person to be discreet, get their opinion, and get out with document, not leave it there as evidence. So they did just that. Within the hour, the document was back in our hands with a suggestion from the court official that we probably should treat it as a forgery. Hearing that, my boss decides to get the fake diploma to the guy and send him away, as long as he brings us the translation we issued for his grade transcripts, which was for the same course as the diploma, so was probably fake. He even offered to pay back the money he paid just to get the translation to us, get your things, and go be a criminal somewhere else. Pretty lenient if you ask me, but it's his business, not mine. The next day, we get a call from the local court asking us why we are refusing to send the document belonging to Mr. X to the court to be certified. Turns out, the guy had gone to court and filed a complaint against us because we refused to do his work. So now my boss is upset and does just as Mr. X wanted, sends the forged diploma to the court. They, of course, immediately can tell it's a forgery. They seized it, opened an investigation against Mr. X, and now he is on the hook for multiple crimes, some of them with serious jail time. The court also asked us to give them the serial number for all of the documents ever translated under this guy's name. Everything, including ID documents, work certificates, everything, so that they can contact all embassies and warn them about the possibility of forgery, which probably means the guy will be blacklisted in every country that matters. My boss made some excuse at first about not having all the serial numbers ready, but then Mr. X came in Monday with his father and issued some strange threats. So the next workday, all the serial numbers were at court. We also didn't have to pay his money back. And to think, had he just done his asked, he wouldn't have been on the hook for so many crimes, and he would also have received a full refund. I would still call the police personally, but I have to admit, this was more entertaining. My Karen sister-in-law ate my dinner, so I kicked her out. My husband's sister moved in with us after she had a major argument about the baby's name. They're expecting and she's 7 months in. She's known to be picky and refuses to eat what we normally cook. We only cook her favorite food, which I can't eat. Allergies, yay. Every day at dinner, I have to figure out what to eat since she only eats food that I'm allergic to. Last night, my husband agreed that he'd cook for her, then he'd cook for us separately. I got home after a long day at work and found out that sister-in-law convinced my husband to only cook the meal she wanted and cancel on the meal he and I planned to have. I saw them eating together in the kitchen. My husband apologetically said his sister convinced him to eat with her and not cook the meal I wanted us both to have. I said it was fine, then went to order some food from the restaurant. I went to take a shower and did some work on my laptop. Then I came downstairs to find my order placed on the kitchen counter. It was open and someone ate the majority of it. I turned around and there was sister-in-law standing there saying that she woke up hungry and couldn't resist the smell that was coming out of the box. I lost it and yelled at her, asking why did she do this? But she said that she did save me some, which isn't even true because there was only some rice and dressing. We started arguing and I told her I couldn't take this anymore. I told her to pack her crap and leave first thing in the morning. She began crying and my husband got involved and defended her up and down, repeatedly saying that she's pregnant and she's eating for two basically. He suggested I go make myself something quick from the fridge and just let it go, but I refused and a bigger argument ensued. Am I the jerk for kicking her out over this? Not the jerk. And you don't have a sister-in-law problem, you have a husband problem. Don't get me wrong, your sister-in-law sounds like a spoiled, selfish, and entitled piece of work, pregnant or not. But your problem is that your husband is more concerned with her health and happiness than yours. He needs to get his priorities in the right place. Not the jerk. And honestly, I think your husband should go with her. She's not an infant herself. She can make her own food if she doesn't want what everyone else is having. And if she wants more when she's done with that, she can find a way to get it that doesn't involve depriving you of even one meal. You're the jerk. She's pregnant. Can't you show the slightest bit of compassion? Having been pregnant many times myself, I can tell you the cravings are insane. At the end of the day, we're talking about food here. It seems like you don't even care that she's pregnant, and like your husband said, she is eating for two people right now. You honestly sound jealous of your husband's great relationship with his sister. One reason my brother cut me off was because of his new wife. She thought our relationship was weird for all kinds of reasons. Newsflash, us sharing a bed when he stayed over was not uncommon at all. She said he could have stayed on the sofa instead. But if you love someone, you should have no problem cuddling with them to stay warm. Stop being a Karen. I'd give anything to just hold my brother one more time, to look in his eyes and tell him how much I love him. But thanks to his insane wife, that will never happen. Yowza! Sounds like you've got more issues than People magazine. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or sister-in-law? Please let us know. If sister-in-law ate my food, I'd put something special in it that would get rid of her for good. Military revenge served hot. Back in my army days, I was once in command of a unit of about 80 soldiers in Hawaii. Most of the soldiers in my command were great people, happy to do their jobs and take home a paycheck. Hard workers, creative, adaptable to unusual army conditions, and generally reliable. But there was one who was trouble from the start. Gentle reader, meet Private Wiggles. My first awareness of Wiggles came 2 or 3 days after I had taken over command of the unit. We're prepping for a month-long training exercise to Thailand, and Platoon Sergeant Maggie tells me Wiggles might not be able to go, as she just had an outpatient medical procedure. Departure is about a week away, and I have to validate the personnel roster to make sure that we've got logistical support for everyone we're bringing, transportation, food, lodging, etc. So I talk directly with Wiggles, and I ask if she's okay to travel and participate in the exercise. Wiggles says it's not a problem, she can handle it. We get to Thailand and set up camp on a Thai army base. 2 days in, and the medical section sends a runner to find me. Wiggles is at our medical clinic, tents with cots and surprisingly extensive medical supplies, laid out with extreme abdominal pain. I cruise over to the clinic tent and the physician assistant, the PA, on duty tells me a couple of things. Wiggles acknowledged recently having an abortion, the previously mentioned outpatient medical procedure, and the PA's examination and testing shows that Wiggles has the single worst case of pelvic inflammatory disease, PID, that he's ever seen. Seriously, this Army PA, who has seen all sorts of crazy crap from soldiers, was emphatically impressed by how bad it was. Wiggles developed PID from failing to get treatment for an STI for a long time, as in she's almost glowing from it. No judgment on the abortion, not everyone is ready to have kids, and the STI-induced PID can be treated with high-dose antibiotics, which the PA has on hand. Not a problem, we've got this covered. Wiggles is released to Sergeant Deb, her section sergeant, who will make sure Wiggles takes her antibiotics and keeps an eye on her for any further issues. Sergeant Deb finds me and First Sergeant Bob about a day later and tells me 2 more things about Wiggles. She's refusing to take her antibiotics and she wants to get out of the army. I again talk with Wiggles. Me. So, you want out of the army? You know you have a couple years left on your contract, right? Wiggles. I know, but I'm just done being a soldier and I want to be out of the army. Me. Okay, I can make that happen. You don't want to be here, then I don't want you here either. But here's the deal, you gotta play by the rules. I can get you out with an honorable discharge, and I'll start the paperwork as soon as we're back in Hawaii. But you need to take your antibiotics, do your job, and be where you're supposed to be. You do your part, and I'll do my part for you. Sound good? Wiggles. Yep, I can do that. Spoiler alert, she couldn't do that. For the rest of the Thailand exercise, Sergeant Deb had to take control of Wiggles' meds and force her to take them. When she could actually find Wiggles, who consistently found someplace else to be. At one point in the next week or so, she accuses First Sergeant Bob of hooking up with her. Easily disproven, as he doesn't have any STIs, and Wiggles has all of them. She was just trying to stir up trouble with wild accusations, I guess. We get back to Hawaii, and I start the process to get her out of the army, because as much as she's been a handful of trouble in Thailand, I'm thinking it's still easier at this point to kick her to the curb than it is to keep her around and punish her before kicking her out. I was wrong. Even as I start to work on her discharge, she ramps up the stupidity. Here are a few examples. Wiggles gets caught drinking. She was only 19. Wiggles and her husband lied to the on-base housing office and provide forged authorization documents to get her into rent-free on-base housing that they didn't qualify for. Side note, Mr. Wiggles was no winner either. He was about to be dishonorably discharged from his infantry unit for selling illegal things to other soldiers. Wiggles shows up at the infirmary to get treatment for facial bruising. Mr. Wiggles had kicked her while he was wearing his combat boots when Wiggles accused him of cheating on her. Wiggles refuses to show up for work or any unit formation and can't be found anywhere for days. Wiggles slashes all 4 tires on Mr. Wiggles' car, then attacks him when he confronts her. Military police are called and end up taking him in when Wiggles gives a sob story, but he's the one with defensive wounds on his hands, not her. One of my male sergeants uses my open door policy to visit me one day. Tells me he saw Wiggles performing at one of the clubs down in Honolulu the night before, and she had also convinced one of our other female soldiers to come along with her to do the same. Here's a weird one. I get a call from a temp agency asking me if it's okay for Wiggles to continue working through them as an administrative assistant for clients in town. Not uncommon for soldiers to have a second job, but with everything else she was up to at that time, this one just had me going, what? There's more, but you get the idea. At this point, Wiggles' actions are egregious enough that I can no longer just kick her out with an honorable discharge. I put her on notice that she's at risk for a court-martial. I thought that threat might help keep her in line, but she just couldn't seem to stop herself from getting stupider and stupider. It's the old 80-20 problem. 80% of your time is spent dealing with the 20% of your folks who are troublemakers. At this point, I'm wasting a not insignificant amount of time dealing with Wiggles' issues almost daily. I had genuinely, and in good faith, offered her the easy path, but I guess she figured she'd try to burn the place down on the way out, since she apparently thought she was getting what she wanted no matter what she did. I was reminded of what my old platoon sergeant used to say when I was coming up through the ranks. You want to get stupid? Go ahead, but I can get stupider. Cue the revenge. She's causing me daily headaches, so I'm going to bring the pain back to her. Honorable discharge paperwork is out the window, and I lean into the special court-martial process instead. My legal counsel tells me that Wiggles' activities are likely to get her a couple weeks confinement at most, maybe not even that. She may get a monetary fine, and she'll probably get an other than honorable discharge, potential for a bad conduct discharge, which are worse. But while her actions have been not that good, they also are not that bad. I'm rational enough to understand that. I have a brief chat with Captain Morgan, Wiggles' military defense attorney, about where I'm going with this case. During our chat, I try to be a gentleman and let him know that Wiggles is going to be trouble for him if he's not careful. He gives me a condescending, "This isn't my first rodeo, bud. I'm a big boy and can take care of myself." Fair enough, I tried to warn you. Normally, a soldier getting a special court-martial for peddly crap might get confined to the barracks, restricted to their on-base quarters or something similar for the duration of the process. It's not like she hurt someone, right? However, my military legal counsel drops this little gem in my ear. He tells me Wiggles has met all 5 of the conditions, danger to others, flight risk, etc., required by military law, Uniform Code of Military Justice, UCMJ, to warrant requesting confinement prior to her trial. He tells me, if you can remember these 5 conditions and elaborate on the details at our next pretrial meeting with the military magistrate, you might be able to get her confined to the Navy brig at Fort Island until the trial. I'm a guy who likes to pay attention to sound legal advice, so I do just as he says. A couple of days later, we go in for the pretrial meeting and I run down the list for the magistrate. Boom! Magistrate orders Wiggles to be confined in the brig through the trial. First Sergeant Bob and Platoon Sergeant Maggie go to pick her up from her on-base housing. She won't open the door, but they know that she's inside because they can clearly hear her and Mr. Wiggles getting it on. This is important for later. The Wiggles finish up, she takes her time getting showered and dressed, and finally comes to the door when it pleases her. Off she goes to the brig. The pre-trial processes take up to the next 4 weeks. During that time, I have to deal with Captain Morgan, the paralegals in his office, and various fun things to do with her pending court-martial. Other than that, it's blissfully peaceful. Wiggles chills in the brig for 4 weeks. Seriously, chills. Every time I had to visit, it was freezing in there. I was required to make weekly welfare visits to see if she's being treated well, if she has any needs that aren't being met, etc. Seems weird, but as her commander, I'm still responsible to make sure the brig staff aren't mistreating my soldier. Other going-ons in this time period. Mr. Wiggles fraudulently applies for a car loan and gets a van in their names. Mr. Wiggles is dishonorably discharged and kicked off the island, flies home to wherever the heck he originated from. Captain Morgan asks me to consider an other than honorable discharge and time served in lieu of taking things all the way to trial. My legal counsel advises me to avoid the court-martial and just kick out Wiggles with the other than honorable discharge. After all, he says, she's already been locked up for almost 3 weeks, so the magistrate will probably just give her time served and the other than honorable anyway. See my earlier comment about sound legal advice. My boss, Lieutenant Colonel Ryan, thinks I'm too invested in this case, that I'm no longer objective. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan insists on coming with me to the brig for the next welfare visit. This is 3 weeks into Wiggles' stay in those luxurious accommodations. Among the other BS lines she throws at us, Wiggles tells us she needs to see the dentist about a filling that's giving her trouble, and Motrin just isn't working. At the end of the visit, Lieutenant Colonel Ryan tells the guards about Wiggles' filling, asks if they could give her anything stronger than Motrin, then instructs them to follow up with the dentist. Guard actually laughs out loud at this and says, "No sir, Motrin is the best we can do in the brig. And that other thing? For the last 2 weeks, she's been telling anyone with ears that she wants to try getting her wisdom teeth pulled before she's kicked out. She doesn't have a problem with any fillings." It was hilarious to watch Lieutenant Colonel Ryan's face go from obvious concern for Wiggles' well-being to outright fury, and the next words out of his mouth were, "That jerk lied to me." I make arrangements with Captain Morgan to accept his request for time served and other than honorable in lieu of court-martial. Sometime later that week, I get a call from the brig. Wiggles is pregnant. Remember the scene at her house 4 weeks prior? And they can't keep her confined anymore because of it. She has to be released back to her unit until the court-martial or other actions are complete. Captain Morgan stakes his reputation on Wiggles being a good girl until we can send her back home to Carolina. He'll come to regret that, and he can't say I didn't warn him. We get Wiggles back from her 4-week all-inclusive stay in the brig. I've accepted Captain Morgan's request to avoid the court-martial, and I confine Wiggles to the barracks under supervision for the next 9 days she has left until her flight to Carolina. Immediately, we have another crap show. Wiggles is smoking in the barracks. Not a big deal that she's smoking, it's just not allowed inside barracks rooms. Wiggles is caught with a bottle of hypnotic in her barracks room. She's still only 19. Wiggles slips out of the barracks and runs off for a day when her platoon sergeant gets distracted from supervising her. First Sergeant Bob and Lieutenant Ricky, the executive officer, go to collect Wiggles' belongings from her on-base housing so we can box it up and ship it to her home, and they find that Mr. Wiggles has left behind a bunch of stuff he stole from other soldiers. Body armor, military equipment, and some ammunition, smoke grenades, and explosives that he stole during the trips to the range. All lined up right inside the front door where it's impossible to miss. They call me, asking what to do. Me. Just collect it all, return the equipment to the central issue facility, and dump the ammo and explosives in the nearest amnesty box. Mr. Wiggles obviously meant for Wiggles to take the fall for having it, husband of the year. If we take that bait, Wiggles will be here forever. I don't want that, do you? Lieutenant Ricky. Nope, I don't want that either. It'll be like it never happened. In light of all this drama, I bring Wiggles into my office to remind her of her agreement to be a good girl till she leaves the island. with Lieutenant Ricky as a witness in the office to protect myself. Me. Wiggles, you're in violation of your release agreement from the brig. You've been sneaking out of the barracks. You've been smoking and drinking. Wiggles cuts me off. Yeah, and doing all kinds of other things I shouldn't have been doing too. Me. Be that as it may, I'm giving you fair warning that you're at risk of losing the deal I made with Captain Morgan. Additionally, you're pregnant again. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but most damage to a fetus from alcohol and smoking will come in the first few weeks after conception. I don't know if you're planning to keep this one or not, but at the rate you're going, this baby's going to be born dumber than you. Wiggles, gaping like a fish, finally picks her jaw up off the floor. Wiggles then bolts from my office and runs down to Lieutenant Colonel Ryan's office at the other end of the building to squeal on me for insulting her, Lieutenant Ricky hot on her heels. She tries to rush into Lieutenant Colonel Ryan's office, but Lieutenant Ricky gets in first and fills him in. Lieutenant Ricky tells me later how it went down. Wiggles is yelling about how I called her stupid. Strangely vanilla thing to focus on considering everything she's done, but you do you, and that she's being mistreated. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan yells at his admin to get Captain Morgan on the phone, now. He goes off on Captain Morgan for his client's crap, tells him to fix this, and makes various threats to Captain Morgan's career. About a half hour later, I get a call from Captain Morgan. Captain Morgan. I can't believe the words I'm hearing from Wiggles. I'm shocked, just shocked, that you would use language like that and call her names. Side note, my mom is an attorney, and I grew up with tales from the courthouse about lawyers using exactly this type of hyperbole. Your Honor, I'm shocked, appalled, and dismayed that opposing counsel would attempt to paint my client in such a light. It's the kind of BS they said when they didn't have a good argument. So as soon as I hear the word shocked, I know I own him, and I immediately cut in. Me. And I bet you're appalled and dismayed too. Captain Morgan, stumbling and sounding slightly confused. Well, yes, of course I am. You can't talk to soldiers like that. I know of a lieutenant colonel, a commander, who called one of her soldiers stupid, and she's no longer in command now. Me. I didn't call her stupid. I informed her of basic biological facts. Not my problem if she takes the news poorly, and arguably, she's not all that smart. Anyway, you called me, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't to warn me about what I said to Wiggles. So what do you want? Captain Morgan. What will it take to prevent you from kicking back our deal? Me. You could get her on a plane tomorrow. Captain Morgan. How about if I get her out of here by Friday? It was Wednesday, and she was due to fly out the following Wednesday. Me. I don't think you can manage that, but good on you if you do. To his credit, Captain Morgan gets Wiggles a flight for Sunday, 3 days early. I print up official orders appointing Lieutenant Ricky as a military escort specifically for her. Lieutenant Ricky drives her to the airport, and the airline desk agent calls me to verify his status when they get to the check-in counter. They give him a special pass to get in through security with her. He stays with her at the gate to make sure she gets on and stays on the plane, then stays on the gate until the plane is in the air. Some boogers are hard to flick. We wanted to make darn sure this one landed someplace else. About a month later, I get a call from the military police about a derelict van in the parking lot with all 4 tires slashed. Guess who it belonged to? It's really kind of sad when I look back on it. I had 2 other soldiers come to me at different points asking to get out of the Army ahead of their contracts. One just didn't want to be in the Army anymore. The other did want to stay in the Army, but had family issues that would be a lot easier to deal with as a civilian. They played by the rules, and I got both of them out with honorable discharges and all the benefits. They even qualified for unemployment. Too easy. Wiggles could have had the same treatment. I told her exactly what I could do for her, then had to shift gears and told her exactly what I was going to do to her. Then I did it. I could have been her best friend on her way out the door, but instead, I ended up owning her and her jerk defense attorney. She did herself out of transition benefits and access to the VA, and picked up a lifelong black mark for employment, all because she couldn't play nice for a few weeks. She decided she wanted to play mess around games, and we all know what happens next. Am I the jerk for telling my brother and sister-in-law to stop blaming everyone else for my nephew's behavior? My nephew, Dylan, is 16. My brother, Jesse, and sister-in-law, Nicole, suffered years of infertility before they had Dylan. Their pregnancy before Dylan's ended in a stillbirth. Jesse and Nicole were absolutely devastated. They were terrified to try again. We all shared this fear, but thankfully my nephew was born healthy. However, Jesse and Nicole have been so focused on the fear of potentially losing Dylan that they won't tell him no, and they don't enforce any boundaries. They excuse his unacceptable behavior by saying we should just be grateful that Dylan's healthy and here with us. Quick note, practically every adult in the family has recommended therapy for Jesse and Nicole, but they refuse because they say that Dylan is healthy and here with us, so everything is fine and to stop bringing it up. All of Dylan's teachers say that he's a respectful and focused student. Dylan is clearly capable of behaving, but his behavior at home is unacceptable because, unlike school, there are no boundaries or consequences enforced on him. Dylan says words he shouldn't, breaks things, and goes off on his parents until he gets his own way. Nicole asked Dylan to please wash his cup, and Dylan responded with, "How about you go forget yourself instead?" Dylan has left multiple dents in both Jesse and Nicole's car while stealing it. Dylan hasn't even begun driver's ed. Jesse and Nicole insist that bad influence kids are to blame for Dylan's home behavior, and these bad kids are manipulating Dylan to act this way. Jesse and Nicole do not take any accountability for their own enabling and lack of boundaries. Jesse and Nicole arrived at last week's family dinner exhausted. They explained Dylan broke their flat screen after Jesse and Nicole told Dylan to get off his Xbox so that they could use the TV. Jesse and Nicole asked if I could help them out with a new TV, and it would be greatly appreciated. I'm childless and in my 30s, so I'm the most financially well off and usually the one they come to ask for help. I suggested instead that they make Dylan get a job because he will learn to be much more respectful of their property after he experiences the hard work that goes into earning it. They immediately shamed me for being so irresponsible because a kid shouldn't have to worry about keeping a job. And, come on, Rose, be an adult. I replied that if they want to talk about being adults, then they need to stop blaming everyone else for Dylan's behavior when he's a monster of their own making. The other dinner guests immediately sided with Jesse and Nicole because I have no idea about how hard it is to punish or ever make your miracle child unhappy, and I have never known the heartache that comes with years of infertility. And I still could have been stingy without starting a fight and ruining a pleasant family dinner. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. He's a monster of their own making. Ask them how their parents would have treated them if they had pulled the same crap that Dylan does. The whole family needs some serious therapy. They're setting their own kid up to fail. I fear for Dylan as an adult because what his life is at 16 is probably also his life at 30. And at that point, his parents will be wondering why he won't get a job and lives in their basement. You better open this dang door. This happened back in the day at your local Arizona convenience store. Strange things were definitely afoot here this night. Just after sunset, it's literally like I Am Legend, where all the infected beer run specialists show up. Many think they're slick, but over time I've learned their patterns in order to prevent major loss. This kid comes in the side door. We're shaped like a golden rectangle and have a left and right side door. He walks the joint, eyeballs the place, sees the human-sized stack of 18 packs, then lights up. I'll stop here to tell you that, for safety's sake, our doors lock with a button under the counter. Important info. He asks me if I could look at cigarettes that are behind me, then starts to mention the higher-up ones. I thought this guy may bolt, so I lock the doors. Turn around, and I hear a suspicion-confirming thud that reverberated through the happiest parts of my soul. As this man staggers up with a miraculously unscathed 18-pack, he looks at me at first in panic, then anger as the realization sets in. Now I'm probably looking panicked because I didn't initially have a plan past here. Just as I'm about to say something, the man realizes he's still holding beer and winds up to run at the doors. Smack! He runs again while saying, "You better open this dang door," enter malicious compliance. You want me to open the door? I'll open it. I'll open it straight to heck. He makes one last charge, and I press the button to unlock the doors last second. I knew he'd get sent flying, but he flew through this, tumbled so gloriously, better than I could have planned for. The doors flew open as he literally somersaulted, and that 18-pack busted open into a spiral of cans. He stumbled, bumbled, fumbled around, grabbing the cans that didn't go off into their own little spiral, spraying everywhere. All this for a few cans of generic. Again, like I Am Legend, and its book-to-movie adaptation, it's unclear whether I'm the good guy or not. Apparently, I have poor work ethic because I don't want to stay after close. We have this family that always comes in late. I'm talking 6 people, 7 minutes before close, and they take their sweet time, sipping water, not opening the menu, etc. Whatever. I have to serve them, so I do. It's part of the job, albeit one of the worst parts. It's a small restaurant, so come end of day, there's no side tasks. To set the scene, it's me literally sitting on my phone waiting for them to finish. I collect dishes often and frequently. The second I hear a fork hit a plate, I'm getting it. I don't offer refills. If a glass is empty, I take it. I even shouted the orders as they gave them because my line cook creeped out of his hole so he could get the orders faster because he wants to leave as well. It was pretty funny. One lady couldn't decide, so I told her I'll get drinks. 3 different drinks per person, while you decide because I have to get the orders ready. You come in late, you get service, but I'm not fawning over you. I'm not enabling that. After they finally leave, my boss comes up and says, "Oh, thank God they're finally gone." I'm like, "Yeah, they always come so late." Then he pops off. Apparently, he's allowed to be grateful they're gone, but I'm not. He's allowed to be inconvenienced, but I'm not. Whatever, dude. Boss, you know what? If you ever came into her store after hours, she'd serve you happily because she has a good work ethic. Me. I guess the difference between her and I is I'd never be that jerk customer who puts a business owner in a position to stay late because of me. If that's a poor work ethic, I'm okay with that. He didn't know what to say after that. My Aunt Karen doesn't tip, so I refused her Instacart order. I, 23 female, have been an Instacart driver since March of 2020, and it's been a lucrative side business for me. I'm always picky on what batches I accept. Miles driven, the amounts of items shopped, and the overall payout are all important to me. A lot of my earnings are going towards a down payment for a house. My aunt, 37, is a notorious cheapskate, even if it affects other people providing services to her. She will pay what is required, service fees and costs of items, and not a penny more. This includes in restaurants. My mother and other family members are aware of her doing this, but enable it by covering up constantly, like slipping cash to the waitstaff behind her back. I absolutely refuse to go along with it. Not sure if this is relevant, but my aunt doesn't get around that well physically, weight and arthritis issues, so being on her feet for a long period of time is difficult for her. She called up my mother and asked if I was on Instacart. She said no. I was in the kitchen eating lunch. She said that she placed her first order excitedly, since first orders have a promotional deal. Mom asked me to log in, and I did. I can see the map of where an address approximately is, along with a few other things before accepting a batch. It was obvious which one was hers. I told my mom I wasn't taking it and that it was a terrible order. High amount of items, 115, and a 15-mile round trip, and no tip. My mom went off on me, saying that she's family, and this should be an exception to my standards. I told her that no tip equals no trip, and that was it. My aunt called my mom almost 30 minutes later, whining that nobody will take her order. I took the phone and told her that I saw the order, and if she doesn't want to appropriately appreciate her shopper, then she can go get the items herself. With that said, I took a much better order and walked out. They're both mad at me and said I'm a terrible person for how I handled things. Am I the jerk? Edit. I didn't expect to get all these responses. Thank you so much. Also, would like to add that I am a shopper that always tries to go above and beyond for my customers. Whenever an item is out, I'm texting customers with pictures of the shelves and offering substitution options. I rarely refund items and customers are happy. My rating is a perfect 5-star at the moment. Edit 2. My pay goes like this. Batch pay is $7 or 60 cents per mile, whichever is more. The rest of what I make is tips. Again, thank you all so much for your responses. Edit 3. Sorry for forgetting to mention this for all the international Redditors out there, but I'm located in the United States, where some service/gig workers depend on tips to survive. Crazy neighbor demands we take down our Halloween decorations. My husband and I moved into this neighborhood about 2 years ago after we got married. We haven't been able to celebrate Halloween the last 2 years due to lockdown. It's our favorite holiday, so this year we decided to go all out. We filled our yard with tombstones and skeletons. All of our bushes and trees are wrapped in fake webbing, the tree closest to the street having a huge 6-foot spider dangling from its limbs. The final touch was a huge rope web that we added extra webbing to fill it out that hangs from our roof all the way down to the street. We got a couple of fuzzy spider decorations to place around the yard. It took us hours to decorate, and we were so excited. My husband looked like a kid in a candy store. Yesterday, while my husband was at work, I heard a knock on my door. It turned out to be my neighbor. He looked absolutely frantic. I didn't even have a chance to ask what was happened when he yelled in my face, "You need to take all this crap down." I was really taken aback. This neighbor has always been very nice to us. I've seen other houses decorate in the past few years, Maybe not to this extent, but I know it's not against our HOA rules. I decided to ask if that was his issue, just in case. He looked at me completely dumbfounded and started going off. "Cut the crap! You need to put all this away. My wife has arachnophobia. Your yard practically gave her a heart attack this morning." I kind of messed up here and laughed. I didn't think our purple fuzzy spiders with big googly eyes would even scare the little kids in the neighborhood. "You're pulling my leg, right?" He got in my face and practically stepped into my house. "You're going to scare my wife to death. If you and your husband don't take all this crap down, I'm reporting you. I'm a retired police officer, and I can make this a real problem for you." I started seeing red and getting really uncomfortable because I was completely home alone, and my husband wouldn't be home for hours. Even if I wanted to take it down, it would be impossible without his help. Listen, this is our first time getting to celebrate Halloween in our house, and we really put a lot of effort into our yard. None of our spiders even look realistic. Can we please not do this right now? "I don't give a hoot. Take it down or else." He didn't really give me a chance to answer. He just started walking back to his yard. Our decorations are not scary. Other neighbors have even said our yard is cute. We also spent a few $100s decorating it. It would be a huge waste to take it all down. I haven't told my husband yet because I know he's petty and will throw a fit, and probably decorate it with even more spiders out of spite. I refuse to take down our decorations. This is really important to us, and I just want to enjoy my favorite holiday with my husband. Am I the jerk? My new neighbor is spying on me with her Ring doorbell. I've been living in my apartment complex for 2 years now, and it's been wonderful. Recently, a young woman moved in across from my apartment. We met each other briefly, and apart from the noise made when she was having movers bring in her things, she's been very quiet and polite. However, there's one thing that bothers me. She has a Ring doorbell on her door. Recently, I saw her leaving, and I asked her why she had it, and that I was worried that she could see me in my apartment. She said she had it for packages and due to no peepholes on the door, and just for extra security. She showed me that, yes, it can see my door a bit, but assured me that she's not on her phone all day checking it. I expressed my discomfort with this, and I asked her to remove it. She told me she was sorry, I was uncomfortable, but she was not spying on me and she had a right to have it up. She wasn't breaking her lease, and she had seen other people in the complex have one. I told her I don't care about the other people. I want it gone, or I will be reporting her. She told me not to bother and called our property manager regarding it because I got a visit from her asking me to leave her in the doorbell situation alone. Am I really out of line for this? You're the jerk. Just think of it as extra security that you don't have to pay for. I guarantee if something happens at your doorstep, the first thing you'll do is go to her for the footage. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or their neighbor? Please let us know. Reddit boy and I don't have one camera up outside. We have 9. You can never be too safe these days. Sorry, you said you were allergic. Another restaurant story from a few years ago. I cook or wait tables, depending on how long it takes me to get fed up with one or the other, and I need a change. We always have to be very careful when it comes to allergies in food service, because it can result in life or death for some people with shellfish allergies, nut allergies, celiacs, etc. Enter the gluten-free trend crowd. While I recognize some people have a legit allergy, there are so many that are trying to be trendy. The big difference is that a person with a true allergy has an already general idea of what they can and cannot have, and will start the whole process off before ordering by letting you know what said allergy is, which we appreciate as it saves time. No big deal. The trendy gluten-free peeps need to tell you 3 times throughout their order, and then always end up backtracking after they find out that basically everything they desire to order either contains gluten or is potentially cross-contaminated. I was waiting this time around, and I started getting tired of hearing about it. We had a particular almost daily regular who would tell us every time about her gluten intolerance, tell all the people sitting near her about it, then proceed to order items that had gluten. I was having a bad day. She comes in, does her normal spiel about being allergic to gluten. I say, yup. Wasn't sufficient enough attention for her. She emphasizes what it does to her delicate system because she's allergic. She orders the usual. Food cooked and prepared in the fryer, which have had gluten-ridden fried food in them all day. I'm thoroughly annoyed now having to listen to her graphic detail about her gut and the effects from gluten. I, as usual, inform her the fryers are cooked in with items containing gluten. As she says the normal, "Oh, that's fine." I have an evil idea pop into my head. Ma'am, you just said you're allergic to gluten. I cannot, in good conscience, put this restaurant or my job at risk by serving you food that you will have an allergic reaction to. I'm sorry, but you're going to have to pick another item. She's shocked, starts backtracking. I stand firm. No, I'm sorry, but I just can't do it. If you get sick from the food because I was careless about your allergy, then I could lose my job. These are the items you can choose from today. Calls manager over. Manager backs me up after hearing the story. Manager was tired of her too. Lady indignantly orders one of the items I listed to save face. Obviously, no tip, but I don't really care. It was still worth it. Still came back 2 days later, miraculously cured of her gluten allergy. I refused service to a guest who used cancer as an excuse to be rude. Location: Nights In and Sleeps, somewhere in Washington State. I'm working the morning shift, and it's already busy as soon as I clock in at 7 a.m. 5 minutes later, I get a call from a guest in room 303. Upon answering, the guest explains that he wants to book a night in the same room and that he's going to be making a new reservation through a third party right now. Okay, I check our availability real quick, and I find that there's no available rooms for his room type, a single queen. However, there are 2 more double queen rooms available. As I was explaining the issue to him, as I was about to go through possible workarounds, he interrupted me.
So, you're saying I have to leave at 11 a.m. and I have to wait until 3 p.m. to get back into this very same room?
He said. I'm still thinking about where the miscommunication occurred, where he assumed that would be the case. I didn't even mention departure times in the conversation. His tone of voice was a blend of angry and entitled belittling towards me. The kind that sends you shaking, makes you think you got into trouble. I say, no, that's not what's going to happen. Let me explain. And the guest tells me the same thing, repeats his phrase.
Sir, I have to leave at 11 just to get into the same room later? I'm paying for this new reservation right now, he said.
Same tone, but louder. He's just angry. With pretty much a sold-out night, I'm tired of his antics already, and I've decided to pull the plug on him, seeing as how he was making me emotional at this point. Yes, you'll leave at 11 just like you said, I state, and I hung up the phone. I didn't find his new reservation yet. A few minutes later, he calls the desk again.
Can I get transferred to customer service?
He asks. I'm just here at the front desk. You're going to have to call. The guest interrupts me. He kept repeating the question again, getting angrier and angrier before I could even answer.
Can you transfer me to customer service? Can you transfer me to customer service? Can you transfer me?
And then he hangs up on the conversation himself. At this point, this man is going absolutely loony. Definitely not good for the hotel. I figure I've already told him he checks out at 11 a.m. and I'll just make my notes about it in the meantime. About 20 minutes later, I get a call from our hotel customer support line. They reference the problem guest and ask me why I'm making him check out at 11 a.m. and then back in at 3 p.m. Keep in mind, the problem guest booked through a third party. No clue why he called the hotel's direct service desk, so I explain myself. I tell the agent we're sold out tonight, and the guest was making grand assumptions that I have no control over. I reiterate that the guest is checking out at 11, but I am now refusing service to him due to his behavior. The customer service agent says that they understand and that they'll explain this to the guest. We hang up amicably. Meanwhile, I find that the problem guest did indeed make a reservation, an already paid for double queen room from the third party that definitely wasn't his room type. Not good. I already refused service to the guest, so I'll have to call him. I do so. When he answers, I tell him that I found his double queen reservation, and before I can tell him that I'm refusing service to him, he interrupted me again.
Yeah, I booked that reservation, but I'll be staying in this room, and buzz off, he said.
The phone clicked on my end. Oh boy. Well, it was about 9 a.m. at this point. The problem guest certainly had their room until 11, but afterwards I was getting him off property and then DNR'd, do not rent. So I waited, and I didn't have to wait long. The same guest comes down from his room. His hair was unkempt, and he was a tall and lanky-looking 30-year-old man. And he had the gall to ask me for a breakfast bag. He even introduced himself.
By the way, I'm the guy from room 303, and I won't be leaving the room. I'm just here to get my breakfast bag, he said.
I stifled a laugh. Oh, okay. I'm not getting you a breakfast bag. I'm refusing to service you, sir, I said. The problem guest just scoffed at me, repeated what I said under his breath, and then left without saying anything else. I was honestly surprised that he just left it at that. I thought that was probably the end of it. At least I officially told him my intentions with him. That wasn't the end of it. I get another call from our hotel customer service asking why I wasn't giving this problem guest his breakfast bag. I told them pretty much the same thing, though I definitely added in the fact that the guest told me to buzz off and was harassing me with these calls. And as a result, I'm refusing service to him. The agent understood, but asked if there was anything we could do to resolve the conflict. I told them that I was willing to cancel and refund the problem guest's reservation if he contacts the third party about it. We hung up amicably. At this point, I bet I was on this dude's mind. After that, I didn't buzz off and let him keep his room on a sold-out night. I'm proven right, because about 30 minutes later, he's at the front desk, lanky arms practically hugging the counter like an orangutan in a defensive posture. "Hello, Mr. Problem Guest," I say.
Can we start over?
He asks. I mull it over, but if he wants to parlay, he has to hear how he affected me first. I look him in the eyes, and I tell him point blank, "I didn't appreciate your behavior towards me one bit this morning," I say. And then he starts saying things.
I'm sorry if I was a little bit rude, but you were being just as bad. Did you know that I found out I contracted cancer yesterday? And then you do this to me? Refusing service and breakfast?
He says. Oh, so he's gaslighting me. I determine that he doesn't want to parlay. So I reply, "You think that having cancer gives you the right to behave like you are towards me?" I ask. The problem guest begins strafing as he's ranting at me.
I haven't done anything rude towards you at all, he stated.
I check the lobby and it's empty besides us. "You told me to buzz off," I reply. I make sure to emphasize his words. He balks and mutters before saying clearly,
"Yeah, I did, but I'm just trying to stay here a bit longer because I have cancer. Would you really kick out a person for contracting cancer?"
Goodness, this guy was putting me on the spot. Oh well, consistency is key. Yes, I'm refusing service to you specifically for your behavior. We don't have any rooms for you anymore, I say.
"I'm going to be on the street because of you,"
he yells. I switch the conversation slightly. "Don't worry about that, Mr. Problem Guest. I have no problems in canceling your reservation you just made. However, you have to contact the third party you paid and tell them about this situation so you can be refunded," I say.
"But it's a non-refundable reservation. I won't get my money back," he says.
"Oh, trust me, you will. As long as you contact the third party and have them contact me, you will," I say. With that, he went back to his room. The problem guest bothered me no more. I got a call from his third party and got the idiot his refund. He left the room in good condition, and I think he left at the side entrance because I never saw him again. He started with a bang and ended with a whimper. For my own work life, it's not worth arguing and placating people like this guy, especially on a night that I know his room will be sold soon anyway. The thing is, he probably would have gotten his wish if he wasn't so mean. I would have just switched one of our pending single queen room reservations into a double room, so Mr. Problem Guest could stay in the same room. But no, he had to assume that he was done for from the get-go and try to make me feel bad about the specific circumstances of doing my job. Because he had cancer, I guess. Am I the jerk for making my son walk the dog? My wife, 39 female, and I, 42 male, have 3 sons. Alex, who's 15, Dylan, who's 11, and Jake, who's 8. When I was a kid, I always wanted a dog, but my parents said no. I never got the chance to get one during my 20s, but recently my interest in owning one was sparked again, so I asked my family what they thought about getting a dog. My wife wasn't enthusiastic about it, but she relented after a few weeks of me asking. Alex and Jake were excited to get one, but Dylan was immediately opposed to the idea. Dylan was always different than my other sons. He never had an interest in sports and was always more subdued than his brothers, which has always made it hard for me to connect with him. He remained opposed to the idea of getting a dog, but me and my other sons managed to wear him down until he finally relented. However, he said that if we did get a dog, he wasn't going to be interacting with it or taking care of it. That would be completely on me and his brothers. I found this ridiculous, but I agreed in the moment, hoping he would change his mind after meeting the dog. The problem is, he hasn't changed his mind yet. We've had Zeus for 7 months now, and Dylan has not warmed up to him in the slightest. He doesn't play with the dog, he doesn't cuddle with him, he doesn't let Zeus into his room because he destroys stuff, and whenever he's near the dog, he just ignores him. I find this completely ridiculous. Zeus loves Dylan. He follows him around whenever he sees him and jumps up on him to get his attention and play with him, but Dylan just isn't receptive to it. To change this, I told Dylan last week that he would be in charge of walking the dog every day after school. Dylan straight up refused and has shut down the conversation every time I bring it up. It's been a week and he hasn't walked the dog once. In my frustration, I told him that if he didn't start listening, that I wouldn't allow him to go to the comic book store anymore, and he freaked out and told my wife. Now my wife is upset with me, claiming that I knew what I was getting into with this, and I knew that Dylan wouldn't be playing with a dog, but his intolerance of the dog is weird, and I refuse to entertain it any longer. My wife has been short with me ever since that conversation, and Dylan is cold with me as well. Alex is now agreeing with his mother, which is making me have second thoughts. So Reddit, am I the jerk? You're the jerk. My dad pulled the same crap on me when I was 13. Let's just say I handled the situation with ease. All it took was a few chocolate bars left laying around the house. Did I feel bad about it? Not one bit. I hope to God that your son does the same thing to Zeus. It would be exactly what you deserve for the monster that you are. Bruh. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or their son? Please let us know. I'm still shocked at that last comment. Entitled sister tries to have me arrested, then tries to break in and steal our stuff. We come from a big New York Italian family. My older sister and I are total polar opposites. She was boisterous, very popular, very full of herself, and self-obsessed. Never finishes anything, never finished school, can't hold a job, etc. I, very small, thin, tomboyish, uncoordinated, clumsy, very shy, bookworm. I did not have many friends and usually was wandering alone somewhere or reading. I've had a job since I was 13. Long story, but all ties in as it's only within a few days of it all happening. We are both adults and are both married. My sister has a son and I'm pregnant with my first child. After giving birth, we moved back to the city my family lives in. My older sister is having marital issues and is getting ready to leave her husband. My husband and I had a decent-sized house that we were renting from my uncle. A friend of ours from college was staying in one of the rooms. After a discussion, we decided to invite my sister and her son, who was almost 5, to move in with us as a live-in nanny. We let her know that she would not have to pay any rent or utilities and that she would need to watch my daughter whenever we needed for work. She readily agreed. My husband and I worked opposite shifts, so this was perfect for us. We moved her in right away. We had her sign a paper agreeing to the whole thing. Nothing technically legal, but just something we can refer to later if needed. Things went south pretty quickly. I will be paraphrasing as this was a long time ago and exact wording won't be possible, but pretty spot on. Firstly, let me note that my older sister had gained a substantial amount of weight, which made certain areas of her upper torso much larger than before. We get up one morning to make coffee. Our roommate is already up. My sister comes out wearing nothing but a very baggy tank top and drawers that were much too small for her. My husband spit out his coffee. Our roommate walked in and immediately walked back out. I told my sister to go change. She huffed, put her hands on her hips, and loudly yelled, "This is my house too. I'll dress how I want." I told her to take some pride in herself and go put something on. She stomped off like a kid, dressed, and came back out. My husband asked me loudly, on purpose so my sister would hear, "This isn't going to be a problem with her going forward, is it?" I looked dead at her face and said, "It better not be, right?" She looked at me, rolled her eyes, and said, "Fine, but that just means these idiots," pointing at my husband and roommate, "don't know what they are missing." Still full of herself. Fantastic. This has only been about 2 weeks since moving her in. The next day, our roommate came to us and said that he believed my sister may have taken money from his room. He stated that he left a small amount of cash on his nightstand and it was gone now. His door was always closed, but it was open when he came home. My sister, unfortunately, has stolen cash from me many times when we were kids growing up, so I knew it was probably her. I went to confront her about it, knowing full well she took it. Again, she immediately started off by yelling as loud as she could, "I did not steal anyone's money. You always blame me for this, and you never have any proof." Her son came running around the corner with a fistful of dollars and a big smile. "Is this the money, Mama? The money you said we could go get McDonald's with?" I stared at her and then at my nephew. She walked over to him, took the money from him, and told me, "This is my money. I already had this before I moved in." The one thing she hadn't noticed was mixed in with US dollars were some Mexican pesos. Our roommate's family lived in Tucson, Arizona. His father was a professor at U of A and was of Mexican descent. They would often go south of the border to visit, as they had a very large extended family. I quickly snatched the money from my sister's hands. I examined the money, and when I pulled out the pesos, I again stared at her. I said, "And just what did you think you were going to do with these?" She slammed her fist in the wall and told me to buzz off, in Italian, and stomped off and slammed her door. My nephew stood there, almost in tears. He was scared and upset. He and I had a wonderful relationship, so I sat him down and told him that everything was okay and not to worry. I would bring him to McDonald's and get him the bestest Happy Meal ever. This brightened him up, and he went skipping off. The next day, we started our work week. I gave my sister our schedules. I went over everything with her. As my daughter had been premature, there was a little bit of extra care involved. She was a few months old now, but she was very small and had a severe lactose allergy. My sister then mentioned that a friend of hers wanted her to go out and party the next night. I told her that she knew she had to watch the baby. She knew several weeks ahead of time what my schedule was and had agreed to it. She said, "I never get to go anywhere, and now that I'm free of that man, I want to go party. Can't you have that guy who lives here watch her?" I said, "That guy is our friend. He's not in town, and it's not his job to watch our daughter. It's your job. You agreed to live here rent-free to watch her whenever we need it." She rolled her eyes and stated, "This is ridiculous. It's one darn night. Can't you figure something else out?" I told her, "If you would like to pay for a babysitter to come over, then fine. But if not, then you will do as you agreed." She said, "Fine." Everything went fine the first night. Came home, baby asleep, sister and nephew asleep. Note on the fridge from hubby stating all seemed good. I go to bed. I'm woken up about 3 hours later to hear kids screaming and laughing. I get up, go out to the living room to see I have a house full of kids and some of my sister's friends, including the one that wanted her to party, sitting on the couch and stairs. I immediately say, "What the heck is going on?" My sister and her friends look up. One of the friends says, "Uh-oh, party police." I grabbed my sister's arm and pulled her to the kitchen. "What the heck is going on here? I'm trying to sleep." She replies, "Since I cannot leave, I invited my friends over to have some fun." I'm really irritated at this point. Your friends need to leave immediately. You did not ask if you could bring all these people here, and it's a work day/work night for us. Have some respect. And you know my daughter cannot have a bunch of people around her. She's still too vulnerable. My sister waves her hand and replies, "Oh, give it a rest. She's in her crib. No one is near her. And I need my friends. I need to socialize. I haven't been able to have fun in years." I insisted again that her friends leave, now. I reminded my sister that no matter what she thinks, this is my house. She stomps off again and asks everyone to leave. I get up to go to work that evening. Everything seems to be fine. My nephew bounces in, happy as always, thrilled with his Happy Meal toy we got him the other day. My sister brushes past me, literally bumping my shoulder. I stare again at her. She mumbles something under her breath and heads to the kitchen. I walk in after her, and she turns and stares at me. She slams a jar on the counter and immediately starts yelling at me. "I didn't know I was going to have to watch your dang kid all the time. I want to go do my own thing." Shocked, I asked her at what point did she not understand that she would be a live-in nanny to watch the baby whenever we were working. She said, "That's not the point. I know what I said, but I didn't think you were serious." I said, "Fine. We'll talk when I get home in the morning from work and figure out where we need to go from here." I got my things and left for work. 2 hours later, I get a call at work from someone identifying themselves as a police officer. They're asking me to come home due to an incident at the house. I arrive about 30 minutes later and see 3 police cruisers, lights on, several officers milling around my home. My older sister standing next to an officer, talking, and my roommate, who appears to have just come back from out of town, talking to another officer. My husband also is now arriving home from school. A police sergeant walks up to me, asks my name. I let him know who I am. He asked me to follow him over to where my sister is. While following the officer, I notice a few dozen yards away, the friend my sister wanted to go party with parked in her car watching. The officer directs me to where my sister is. I wander over, and immediately my sister starts yelling at me. "How could you do that? How could you just leave her like that? What is wrong with you?" I stand frozen, not understanding the situation yet. The officer looks at me and asks where I've been. I tell him I was at work. The officer asks if I make it a habit to leave my infant alone at home while I work. It finally dawns on me what's going on. I tell the officer, absolutely not. Never. My sister here was hired to be our live-in nanny and was to be watching her tonight. She watched her last night as well. She has the schedule in detail and we have discussed everything at length. My sister immediately shouts, "That's a lie. I had no idea you were going to work. I was leaving with my friend to go out for the night when I heard the baby cry. I had no idea you left her here. I figured you guys had gone out for the night." Our roommate and my husband join us. My roommate says he came home to find my sister on the phone with the police accusing me of abandonment. My sister's friend was in the house telling her to hurry so they wouldn't miss the drink specials at a local bar. My husband goes in the house with an officer, shows him our work schedule on the fridge, my sister's room, and the baby's crib in her room. He then shows him the paper we had her sign with all the agreed to info. Another officer goes over to the car parked down the street and tells the friend to come over. The officer starts to question the friend about the phone call. My sister immediately starts yelling, "She has nothing to do with this. She was here to pick me up when we both heard the baby crying." I tell the officer that this is par for the course with my sister. She made all this up. My sister again starts screaming at the top of her lungs, "This is all a lie. I don't know what she's telling you, but it's a lie. I had no idea the baby was here alone," and starts to fake cry. And just as things seem ridiculous enough, my nephew is brought out crying and telling the officer holding him, "But mommy said it was okay to leave the baby, that auntie would be home soon, and we were going to go out." I started to laugh. I almost bent over laughing as my sister reached for her son, saying, "He doesn't know what he's saying." My nephew said, "Mommy, don't lie. You said we were going to go play." That was awesome. The look on her face and the officers' faces were priceless. My sister had fabricated this ridiculous story and called the police, all so she didn't have to work and could go out drinking. The crib was in her room. The work schedule and the signed paper, plus out of the mouths of babes, my nephew telling his mommy not to lie in front of half a dozen police officers. I was upset, but I was laughing. The officers were upset now too, realizing the situation. I told the officers I wanted my sister off my property. She was not on the lease. They escorted her in the house, had her pack up the few belongings that she came with, which wasn't much, just clothes, hygiene stuff, and a few personal knickknacks. I walked up to my sister with a signed agreement, tore it in half, and handed it to her. I told her that she was never welcome back, and I wanted nothing to do with her ever again. She could go with her friend. She was escorted off the lawn. I told the officers I didn't want to press any charges. She had no money and nowhere to go other than her friend. That was more than enough. The police eventually leave. My husband, roommate, and I go sit in the living room staring at each other. We have no words. We just sit for a while. The next day, husband is off at work, roommate is sleeping in. I take baby to go to a doctor's appointment and the grocery store, then to stop at my dad's place for a brief visit. I left a note on the fridge letting my roommate know where I was. Just as I arrive at my dad's, he jogs down the hallway and says, "Better go home, your roommate just called." It takes me about 15 minutes to get home, and standing in front of the door is my sister, screaming at the top of her lungs with 2 police officers on either side of her. I drive up and get out of my car. My sister immediately tries to rush at me, screaming at me in Italian. The officers stop her. My roommate comes around the backyard, having come out of the back door instead of the front where my sister was. I ask, "What the heck is going on?" Neighbors are now coming out to see what's happening. My roommate called the police because my sister tried to kick in the door, said that we had all of her electronic equipment in there and that this was her house and we illegally removed her. When he wouldn't let her in, she began kicking and pounding on the door and screaming at the top of her lungs. My husband had a very nice stereo set up with a multi-disc CD player, speakers, subwoofers, tuner, several dozen CDs, etc. We had a new large TV with several video game consoles, DVD, VHS players, and a bookshelf full of movies and video games. My sister was attempting to break into the house and steal all of it. My sister was unhinged at this point. She was so incensed that spit was flying away from her mouth when she was screaming. "How dare you do this to me? Those are all my things. You stole everything from me. You are a liar and a thief, turning the police on me. I will get you for this. I'm going to have you evicted. I'm calling Dad. He will have his brother kick you out, and you'll be on the street. Ha 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 ha! On the street, you jerk! The police ask us if she's on the lease. We tell them no and give them the report from last night. He looks at the report, nods, and says, "Oh, this is that place. Yeah, we heard about this. Is this the same lady that called in the false report last night?" I tell him yes, same person. The officer asks if I would like to trespass her. I tell him absolutely. He turns to her while his partner takes out some papers and starts writing. He gives her the spiel regarding the trespass order. The officer looks at me and I walk over and quietly say, "See that car parked 2 houses down?" "Yes, that one. Can you issue the driver a trespass order too? That is the other person from last night." The officer waves over the car. They tell my sister if they have one more incident with her, she will be under arrest. She stomps off down the street to her friend's car, literally screaming at the top of her lungs everything you can imagine in English and Italian. We thank the officers and they take off. I talk to my neighbors and apologize for the trouble. Most of my neighbors are elderly and very understanding. A retired Navy officer next door says that he will be happy to keep an eye on the house for us when we aren't home. I thank him profusely. He pats his truck and says, "Your sister is a nut." I agreed. I head back over to Dad's place to visit and go over the last 2 days' events. While Baby is inside sleeping, my dad and I go to his garage to do some work on a project car of his. Being the only kid of his who knows how to work on cars, this is our thing. We bust a few knuckles, have a couple of drinks, and just hang out for a while. A couple hours later, we hear a car screech to a stop in front of the house. He has a very long dirt driveway, so the car was still on pavement. Out jumps my sister, red-faced and fuming red. She immediately starts stomping down the driveway, fists balled up. My dad and I are sitting on the edge of the car near the engine, hood up, staring at her. She starts screaming. "Did she tell you she kicked me and your grandson out on the street? Did she tell you she lied to the police about abandoning her daughter? Did she tell you that she called the police on me when I tried to get things she stole from me? I am the victim here, not her. I want her evicted from Uncle's house. I want you to call him now and kick her out. She has no right to do this to me. No right to be here." My dad looks down at me and I shrug. She stops about 30 feet in front of us. She literally starts jumping up and down. "I want her kicked out, now, now, now!" Seeing a 25-year-old woman jumping up and down, screaming like a 2-year-old, was quite the sight. My dad looks at her. My dad can look at you and make your bones freeze. The look of death. My sister immediately stops and says, "No." That was it. Just no. Turns around and starts working on the car again. I smirked at my sister. Enraged, she starts screaming at me again. My dad slowly turns around, takes 2 steps towards her, and in a deep, loud, reverberating voice says, "Basta!" Kinda means enough. "You will not behave in this manner. You will not talk to your sister until you can be civil. Go away now." You do not ever disobey my dad. My sister, still red-faced, turns around and walks off to the car, gets in. Her friend revs the engine of her very old beat-up sedan, screams, "Forget you both!" and takes off. My dad turns around and says, "Well, how about some pizza?" Takes another drink and goes back to working on the engine. I haven't spoken to my sister since. My daughter is now 27. Entitled babysitter is demanding I pay to have her laptop fixed. I, a single mom of 2, hired a babysitter after I started working my new job. I used to do work from home for 2 years. My kids are 8 and 6. The babysitter is 17. She brings her laptop with her to study, which is perfectly okay with me as long as she keeps an eye on the kids. Yesterday I came home and the babysitter showed me that her laptop had been broken by my youngest. I was shocked. I asked how this happened, and she said that she left the laptop in the living room and went to make the kids lunch, but my youngest grabbed it and ran with it until he dropped it and broke the screen. I said that was horrible and apologized to her, but I did state that it was her fault for leaving the laptop within the reach of the kids. She said she thought my kids were old enough to know not to touch other stuff. I explained how they might have thought it belonged to us since it was in our house. She asked if I could pay for it to be fixed, but I refused and insisted it was her problem, not mine. She ranted about having exams soon and not having enough money to get it fixed. We argued, and I had to tell her to go home after she persisted. Later on, I got a call from her dad, basically blaming the whole thing on me and demanding I pay to get the laptop fixed, but I still refused. Now she's refusing to come again unless I pay for her laptop repair, even though I paid her in advance to watch the kids. You're the jerk. A 6 and an 8-year-old are absolutely old enough to know not to touch other people's stuff or run around with it. Signed, a mother of a 6-year-old. You're the jerk. You pay for what your kids destroy. That's part of being a parent. End of story. You're the jerk. It happened in your home and was done by your kid. Pay up, or maybe she can sue you and get it off your home insurance in small claims court. You're the jerk. Your kid broke it, and it wasn't an accident either. They're also 6 and 8, not 2 and 4. They knew it was an electronic device, and unless you literally have the exact same computer, they knew that it was hers. Not the jerk. Can't believe all these people telling you that you're the jerk in this situation. What if they had gotten hold of something dangerous? If she had been supervising them the way she was being paid to, this never would have happened. If she tries any funny legal business, reach out to me. I'm a family attorney and we'll take your case pro bono, because this would be a situation in which we can definitely countersue due to the fact that she was not babysitting the way she was supposed to be. I once won my client a settlement for $175,000 by countersuing someone who left their pool gate open. Long story short, people who make foolish decisions will be held accountable in a court of law. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or the babysitter? Please let us know. I think that lawyer that commented was the biggest jerk of them all. Arrogant teacher threatened to send me to the principal. I obliged. This was over a decade ago, so some details are foggy. Going into senior year of high school at a small rural high school where the smart kids all get sent off to the distance learning building their junior and senior year to take college courses. Junior year, the woman in charge of us in distance learning had been teaching at our school district for over 15 years. She knew us, our families, taught us in multiple grades, and coached about 3/4 of us in track or tennis. Keep in mind, our entire student body, K through 12, wouldn't have broken 500 kids, even if they padded the numbers with voluntary pre-K and GED students. She knew us, our antics, and generally trusted us to get our work done. She made sure we actually watched our classes and didn't get into a bind on our assignments. Outside of that, as long as we were doing something productive and had our main stuff done, our time was ours to use as we saw fit. In my case, it was mostly spent playing guitar and reading up on the playbook for whatever athletic competition I had that week. I was an academically good, but insufferably lazy student. Summer passes. First year of senior year comes around. The teacher we all adored had moved away. Her husband got a job somewhere else that paid big bucks. In her place is some tall, red-haired jerk that none of us had seen before. Turns out he's the new head coach for girls basketball and our new distance learning supervisor. Our college courses didn't start for a couple of weeks, so he spent the entire first day pontificating on how lucky we all were to have him, since he had spent the last 10 years in the university world and knew how it worked and would make sure we weren't just slacking off because we were seniors. The fact that he went from university to high school should have been a red flag to the people that hired him. Whatever. A couple of weeks go by of this coach, we'll call him Bob, making us do pointless practice assignments like writing a paper on respect in APA format or researching a new car for his wife while citing our sources, all under the guise of making sure we were prepared. The students all politely informed him that these courses were through a community college and were generally no more difficult than a normal AP high school class, except for the STEM courses. Fast forward 2 weeks and courses start. Finally, we thought. Bob's antics throughout the year would have been bearable had he not made a habit of insulting students who did something that wasn't to his liking, or held a political view contrary to the university culture he came from, which was all of us. He went to demanding that we all submit our assignments to him before our actual professors, which he then did not go through quickly, causing a great many of us to lose points for late assignments. We started ignoring this and sending him a copy at the same time we submitted the assignment, and telling us all that we were in no way mature enough for this kind of learning. We all had to maintain an institutional GPA of 3.0 or better to stay in the program. We averaged 3.8. And if it was up to him, he'd take our entitled butts right back over to the main building for real classes. The straw that broke the camel's back came at the end of the fall semester. We had all taken our finals, passed, and were looking forward to an easy few weeks. Bob came in that morning in a worse mood than usual. I found out years later this was the day his divorce proceedings began, and started going off on one of the students for how she was dressed. She ignored him, as did the rest of us. We were all just making it through to the end of the semester. Bob then began one of his speeches about how terrible and entitled we all were. No one was paying attention, which made him even more angry, but he knew he couldn't really punish us for anything. So he zeroed in on one kid that had been placed in the classroom for remedial learning as it was a quiet, consistent environment. He was the one student in the room actually working on something. The conversation will be paraphrased as this was over 10 years ago. It went as follows. Bob.
So, what are you doing?
Student, somewhat rudely. I'm trying to study for my test coming up so I don't get held back. Bob.
For what? So you can eventually go flip burgers at the Dairy Queen?
By the way, the student he was talking to now makes over 6 figures as a welder.
Please, you're not going to get it done anyway, so have some respect and pay attention when an adult is speaking.
That was it for me. You see, the student he was talking to happened to be my cousin. I was very familiar with his academic and personal struggles, and I knew how hard he was working to straighten up. Our family is a rather well-known and affluent one in our community, and this student was cruelly regarded as a mess-up by some folks outside of our family, despite his overwhelmingly kind disposition. Now, this jerk teacher was insulting the most vulnerable member of our class and my family. It was time to get this guy in the worst way I could think of without doing myself over too or getting arrested. You see, my mother had been teaching for 25 years in the district at that point, and my stepfather is a retired guidance counselor, so I knew the rules. I'd previously refrained from honestly discussing his conduct with my parents because Bob's daughter had actually become part of our friend circle, and I knew how hard life would be on her if her dad lost his job, as his reputation made her life hard enough. The college courses kids also all did theater and athletics together, so she was part of our life. Again, tiny school. Half the varsity offensive line was part of a district-winning production of Flowers for Algernon, and our star running back was also a regional qualifier in robotics. But she was graduating with the rest of us and going to school out of state, so collateral damage would be minimal. Knowing what would happen next, I casually remarked, "Coach Bob, it seems to me that if you knew half as much about basketball as you think you know about this student, you'd probably still have your job at the university. Or you would have got your contract renewed for another year at the last school board meeting. Where will you go after the school year ends?" The room went dead quiet. That info wasn't in the newspaper yet. Bob's face turned an absolutely vibrant shade of red. His voice shaking, he tells me, "Outside, now!" I calmly set down my book and stepped out into the foyer of the building. Bob followed me out, closed the door, and proceeded to scream every insult and word he could think of in my face for at least 4 straight minutes. I was the most smug, lazy, entitled little jerk he had ever seen apparently. I may have been able to pull the wool over the eyes of my pastor, every other teacher, his daughter, and all of my coaches, who were constantly irritated with me for being lazy. But goodness, I couldn't fool him. I was never going anywhere in life, and I was just going to ride my family name like a parasite. To be honest, his lung capacity was kind of impressive. I don't think he took a single breath for the entirety of his rant. Once he stopped to catch his breath, I asked, "Coach Bob, may I go back to reading now?" Bob screamed, "No! Your butt is going straight to the principal. The student and I will write down exactly what you said, and you will sign the darn thing. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir. I'd be happy to sign it." Bob gave me a questioning gaze. "Actually, I'd be happy to go down to the principal's office. I need to ask him for a letter of recommendation for a scholarship. And of course, he will ask me what led to me saying something so disrespectful. Of course, I can't lie to him, and then I'll mention our little chat out here." By this point, the teacher in the other classroom, who I also happen to be related to, came out to see what the commotion was and heard at least the tail end of his glorious speech. She was about to say something, but I turned and gave her a smile and a wink. I had it in the bag. 18-year-old me was riding high. Bob sent me back into the distance learning room and followed me in. I stood by the door, awaiting my office referral. A minute went by and it never came.
"Sit down, Jones."
"Coach Bob, I believe classroom insubordination requires an office referral."
"If that's the way you want to go."
Bob's voice started to raise, but at this point, he understood his situation. He wrote up the office referral, and I walked happily down to the admin office. The principal was surprised to see me, and even more surprised that I was sent there on disciplinary action. I told him what had happened, and I got detention for 1 day as punishment for open disrespect of a teacher, which I kind of deserved, and a thank you for my honesty. The next 2 weeks were heavenly. Bob barely spoke a word and spent most of his time glaring at me or looking at job listings. At the start of the spring semester, he wasn't in distance learning. In fact, he was nowhere to be seen. Turned out, he had accepted a last-minute opportunity somewhere else before the Christmas break and had to move there in time for spring practices to start. What a coincidence. I found out years later that Bob was soon let go from his next coaching job and he had gotten divorced. Other faculty had apparently repeatedly complained about his conduct and he was on incredibly thin ice long before my little stunt. Honestly, I kind of feel sorry for the guy after writing this memory down. Congratulations on everyone who made it to the end. Am I the jerk for calling the police on my fiancé? Last night, my 35 male, fiancé, 38 female, left in the evening to give a friend's son a ride to his home. She implied she'd be home before 9. She left at around 7:45. 10:15 rolled around and she still wasn't home. I texted and she apologized to me, saying that her friend's son was actually in the next town over, maybe 30 minutes away, and she was coming home now. 11:45 rolled around and she still hadn't come home, so I called her to no answer. Texted her, no response. I was getting very upset. 12:30 rolled around and still no response and no answer to my phone calls. I was extremely angry. 1:30 rolled around and my anger had completely transformed into worry. Not answering my calls and texts not read. Around 1:45 I called the police. I've always heard that the first 24 hours of someone being missing is the most important, so I didn't want to delay. I asked them to let me know if there had been any traffic accidents involving her car, and the operator told me that they would put out the word and send some cops to check along the route she would travel. I called all the hospitals in the area to check if she had been checked in, and I waited outside watching the road for her car for 3 hours, partially because I didn't want the kids to hear me on the phone with hospitals, and secondly because I was sick with worry. At 7 a.m., she came home. She apologized for being out and said she had no excuse. She was driving home and felt tired, like she was falling asleep at the wheel, so she pulled over to the side of the road to sleep. When she did that, she found that her brand new phone had stopped working. She says she napped anyway because it was the responsible thing to do, and then came home at 7 a.m. to bring the kids to school and get to work on time. I immediately called the police and told them that she had come home safely and gave them the case number and told them to stop searching, which they did. My fiancé brought the kids to school and left for work. I set out to start cleaning. Cleaning de-stresses me sometimes, and I got a call from a policeman asking me where she worked. I told him and asked why, and I was informed that it was their policy to check on the person's wellness after a missing person is found. I asked them to not go by her work, but to give her a call instead. He said he couldn't promise anything. My fiancé is relatively new to her job. A police officer showed up and asked to speak with her. She's now enraged at me for calling the police and sending a cop to her work and making her look bad. She's saying I overreacted and that she wasn't missing and that I was punishing her for doing the responsible thing and not driving while drowsy. She's saying that she is never going to leave the house again except for work because she's afraid I'm going to call the cops on her again. So, did I overreact? Should I have waited 2 days like she's saying I should have? Not the jerk, but you know she's lying, right? OP. I do suspect that her story isn't truthful, but she doesn't really have a history of lying to me, so I've been trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. No. Her whole story is a big fat lie. She told you she would be home by 9, but somehow was wrong about where the kid lived? Did she not know the town beforehand? Did she just start driving 30 minutes and then the kid goes, "Oh, no, wait, I actually live in XYZ." That part of the story doesn't even make sense. So she ended up changing the time. Then she got tired and pulled over and napped on the side of the road? You do realize that if she had been napping in her car like she claims, the police would have found her, right? And then her new phone just happened to not be working, despite the fact that that simply does not happen? And even if it wasn't working properly, she still could have called 911. That's not even mentioning the fact that I don't know a single woman, myself included, who would pull over on the side of the road and sleep in her car with no phone. You said in another comment that this isn't the first time she's been gone longer than the errand would take. You're being conditioned to not ask questions and to accept whatever answer she feeds you. Good liars do this. Good liars don't start with the big lie, they start small, and when you believe that, they build on it. And if you do ask questions, they treat you as if you are the unreasonable person. They question your questioning. Your fiancé is a good liar. Of course you believe her. She set you up for it. Not the jerk. She said she was on her way home at 10:15 p.m. and then disappeared until 7 a.m. Of course you were going to call the police and have them go looking for her. If she had been in an accident or worse, it would have been horrible if you'd waited 2 days to call. That being said, she's definitely lying about what happened. It honestly sounds more like she fell asleep at her affair partner's place and concocted that bogus excuse to cover herself. Am I the jerk for lying about a food allergy? I'm vegan, have been for over 5 years. I'm lucky to live in a major city with a plethora of entirely or partially vegan restaurants, but when I visit my family in rural Pennsylvania, my options become non-existent. Attitudes towards veganism here range from ignorance to outright hostility. I try to avoid going out to eat with my family when I'm home at all costs, but sometimes it simply isn't avoidable. For example, my sister's wedding rehearsal dinner. My sister had her dinner at the foremost fine dining establishment in this town. It's a big old tavern that bills itself as a French-influenced steakhouse. Menu fare is every imaginable cut of steak drowned in butter, with some chicken and fish drowned in butter, plus sides of veggies and mashed potatoes that are, yes, smothered in butter. The 1 or 2 vegetarian dishes are buttered and drowned in creamy sauce. Given that my little brother used to wait tables here, I know that they frown upon substitutions and don't use much veggie oil for the sake of quality. I've had 2 negative experiences here too. I tried to explain my vegan diet my first time here in Dev, yet my sad little plate of steamed broccoli was drizzled with butter and my iceberg lettuce salad came with ranch. The second time, a chef came out personally and promised me that his tomato pasta dish was vegan, only for me to find out they had swirled Parmesan cheese into the red sauce to disguise that they had accidentally sprinkled it on top. That incident broke my trust completely. For my sister's dinner, I called ahead and told the chef that I have life-threatening food allergies to meat proteins, dairy, including butter, and egg. Finally, they took me seriously. I was served a dish of plain pasta with salt and pepper with fruit, which sucked, but I appreciated the consideration. For those allergies, though, they had to scrub down the entire kitchen, clean the fryers, check the ingredients list of their products, etc. That prep apparently cost them an extra 2 hours, and, I didn't realize this, they charged my parents, who are paying for the rehearsal, an extra several $100s for their time. My sister and parents are livid. I already sent my mom the several hundred needed to cover the extra cost, but they're upset at me for lying and humiliating the chef and restaurant, whom they have close ties to. My sister's wedding is this weekend, and something tells me that it's going to be tense. Personally, I think that if this restaurant is going to continue with their ignorance and inconsideration, they got what they deserve. Am I the jerk for ensuring my needs are met? You're the jerk. Hi, I'm someone with an actual food allergy, lactose and potentially gluten. Please don't use a condition that can be life-threatening to make your life easier. Also, you make their job 10 times harder. You're the jerk. Fellow person with food allergies here. OP is the exact reason restaurants don't take me seriously when I say, "No tomatoes, please, I'm allergic." And when it comes out with, they say to just take them off. No. Does anaphylaxis mean anything to them? No, because of people like OP. You're the jerk. And this really got me. Personally, I think that if this restaurant is going to continue with their ignorance and inconsideration, they got what they deserved. This sort of attitude is what makes many people not be able to stand vegans. It's a steakhouse in an area where you admitted that veganism isn't considered a big thing. They probably don't have easy means to make a vegan meal and don't get many requests like this. You even said when they tried, it wasn't that great. Since you've had previous issues with this place, you could have called them in advance and been really blunt about what you can and can't eat and ask if they can't accommodate you, but if you can bring your own food, as this is for your sister's rehearsal dinner. Lying wasn't the way to go about it at all. Not the jerk. I don't think it's so crazy you wanted a vegan option when you're a vegan. Not to mention, you've already had a bad experience trying to get a vegan meal there. It's kind of inconsiderate of your family to have not thought about you at all and made sure there was a vegan option. You covered the cost too after finding out. Well, what do you think? Is OP the jerk or not? Please let us know. This reminds me of a joke. So one time a vegan walks into a steakhouse. Am I the jerk for evicting my nephew and niece from my apartment? I, male 38, let my nephew, Nick, who's 20, and his sister, Sadie, who's 18, live in my old apartment to stay at rent-free and focus on college. This isn't a new thing because I've always been close to them and helped them and their parents, my brother and his deceased wife, a lot. This situation started when my wife and I found out that my wife's pre-existing health issues had made her become infertile. This was so devastating for the whole family, not just us. My wife told me about a series of calls she received via our landline. She said the caller would just play a recording of baby noises and phrases like "mama" every single time. We'd get at least 4 to 5 calls a day, and I've listened to the last 2 of them. All had the same baby sounds. We figured it was someone mocking my wife's fertility issues, but didn't know who it was because we've told a lot of people about it. I told my friend about it, and he was able to identify the caller as my nephew Nick, then my niece Sadie. I was in shock, and it took me some time to actually believe what I was told. After it was confirmed, I just had a breakdown and went over to the apartment and confronted them. They denied it till I threatened to evict them. They said they did this as a prank, and it was directed at my wife, not me, and they thought it would get her to laugh or something. I called them idiots, because not only my wife didn't laugh, but she cried her eyes out every time we got those awful prank calls. I told them I want them out of my apartment and gave them eviction papers. They freaked out and started pleading with me until I left. They had my brother call me later to ask about what was going on. I told him, and he started apologizing on their behalf, saying they're just kids that were messing around, not realizing what they were doing. He went on about how evicting them will affect them and him since he's struggling with his own situation. I said I know he's a widower. He's struggling, but my decision will stand. He started begging me to let it go and promised to have Nick and Sadie grovel with apologies, but I refused. Now my parents got involved, saying the kid's dad is choosing to have nothing to do with them if they get evicted, and said that the kids look up to me and I shouldn't let what happened ruin the relationship we have. Not the jerk. Sorry, any reasonable 18 and 20-year-olds would know this was not a funny prank. They do not get to live rent-free in your space while simultaneously being cruel to your wife. If it was supposed to make her feel better, they wouldn't hide behind anonymity. They were cruel and feel bad now because they were caught and need to face the consequences, and not because they see what they did was wrong. Neighbor thinks he's entitled to take our fence down. I rent a house with my sister and brother-in-law, as well as my hubby and kids. At the time of this, I only had the one kid, and it's only my sister and I in this story. The neighbor isn't so much of a neighbor, but a guy who bought the house next door, tore it down, and built 2 of those skinny houses. I can't remember what they're called. Property investors, developers, I have no idea. It was summer, so my sister and I were out in our backyard with my daughter playing around when this guy pops his head over the fence and asks if we can talk. I don't like talking to people, so my sister went up to him to see what was up. Guy: "Hey, I'm so-and-so. Do you live here?" Sister: "Yes, we do." "Great. I own these 2 houses next door, and I'm trying to get them ready to put on the market. I have guys coming to build a fence, and I was hoping you'd be okay with me having them rebuild this side of your fence as well. I'll cover the costs of everything." Sister: "That sounds great, but unfortunately, we don't own the place, we rent, so you'll have to call my landlord. I can give you his info." Guy, looking slightly frustrated: "Okay." My sister gives him our landlord's number and he leaves. We send off a quick text to our landlord to let him know what happened and that someone would be calling him about the fence. Landlord was game, as he didn't have to pay for anything, but had a feeling the guy would want to change the fence style, so definitely wanted to talk to him about it. A little over a week later, it was morning. I let my dogs out and went to make my daughter breakfast. I was about to start when the doorbell rang. There was a guy dressed in construction gear. I opened the door, and before I can say hello, he goes, "Construction dude."
You need to get your dogs inside.
Me: "And why is that?" Construction dude:
Because we're here to take the fence down, and we can't do that with the dogs out there.
Me: "Oh, sorry. I didn't realize everything had been all sorted out. No one notified me. Yeah, I'll get them in." I close the door, and as I'm about to head to the back door, a thought crosses my mind that maybe I should confirm everything with my landlord. Well, good thing I did, because he had not received one call from anyone about the fence. Not even a missed call from a number he didn't recognize. Nothing. At this point, my sister was awake, and I had continued to leave my dogs outside. My landlord suggested for the supervisor and asking him to have the guy who hired him call my landlord. I forgot to mention, totally important though, my landlord owns the whole fence. Even though it's technically a shared fence, he's the one who owns it completely. They need my landlord's permission to take it down or face destruction of property charges. I don't even have a chance to finish writing my landlord's number down before there's another knock on my door. My sister answers this time. "Construction dude,
You need to get the dogs inside.
Sister, you need permission to be here. My landlord just informed us that he had no idea anyone was coming to take the fence down today or any day, which is pretty concerning since he's the one that owns the fence. Construction dude.
I don't know anything about that.
Sister, I get that. That's why I need to talk to the supervisor. I can give him landlord's number and we can get all of this cleared up. My sister then goes to talk to the supervisor. I stayed inside with my daughter, dog still outside. My sister comes back and says the supervisor was going to call the guy who owns the houses to get him to call our landlord. About 20 minutes go by when construction dude comes back.
Everything has been cleared up. Could you get the dogs in now?
Sister, yes, we can.
Thank you.
I let the dogs in and my sister and I go about our day. I should have called my landlord to confirm a second time. About an hour later, I get a text from my landlord. Landlord, hey, no one's called me yet. Are the construction guys still there? When I tell you my heart was in my stomach and throat all at the same time, I quickly call him. Me. Oh my gosh. You need to get down here. I'm so sorry. The construction dude came to the door and said they worked everything out with you and were given the go-ahead to start working. I should have called you again, but I didn't even think. I'm so sorry, so sorry. Landlord. Whoa, it's okay. It's not your fault. You shouldn't even have to be dealing with any of this. The guy should have called me as soon as you said you didn't own the place. Can you do me a favor though? Go see how much of the fence they tore down and take pictures, please. Me. Yeah, I can do that. Landlord. Awesome. Send them to me as soon as you have the pictures. I'm on my way. I then go out back to have a smoke and pretend I'm playing on my phone while getting pictures. They had already taken down the majority of the fence, and the only parts left was the frame about halfway down. I sent the pictures off to my landlord, then went inside to wait till he got there. Now, reader, if you haven't already figured out, my landlord is a super calm guy. He knows his laws and knew this was going to go his way no matter how it played out. When he got to the house, he walked up to the supervisor with a smile on his face. Everything that follows was told to me by landlord after he was done talking. I'm trying to remember this as best I can. So landlord went to the supervisor. Landlord. Hey, I'm C. I own this house here, and this happens to be my fence you're currently tearing apart. Supervisor. Eyes go a bit wide. Oh, we had permission to… Landlord. No, you had permission from no one. No one with the authority to give you permission anyway. I also know for a fact my tenant told you that you needed to have your client call me. Supervisor. I called him, and he said he didn't need to do that, and that everything was good to go. He's already had your permission. Landlord. Then I suggest you call him up for me, please. Supervisor calls the guy and explains that my landlord was there and wanted to talk to him. Landlord. Hey there, it's C. I'm the guy that owns the house that you're currently destroying the fence off. I'm just wondering why you thought you had permission to tear apart my fence. Guy. Oh, I didn't realize the house was owned by someone else. The girl I talked to said I could go ahead and replace the fence. Landlord laughs. No, she didn't. She told you that she didn't own the place and you needed to call me. Even gave you my number. Guy. Now that's not true. Landlord. Don't. Just don't. I trust my tenants more than I trust you. So stop with this, and instead, let's talk about the fence. I want my fence back the way it was. Guy. I was of course going to put the fence back. I was going to change the style a bit. Is that all right? Landlord. No, it's not. Had you called me, you and I could have worked out a new style of fence. All I would have asked is that you at least look similar to the rest of my fence. Now, if you want a new fence, you can pay to have my whole fence replaced to look the same. Guy. Okay, I'll have the fence redone the way it was. Landlord. Sounds great. Also, don't forget, the nice side faces me. We all then had a good laugh about how everything played out. Before leaving, my landlord asked if we needed them to do anything to make all this easier on us, since we were the ones living here. We asked that he have them bring in a temporary fence so that we could still let the dogs out. Landlord said he would make sure they brought one in at the expense of the guy, of course. You may think this is the end, but it's not. A temporary fence was brought in, essentially these huge metal panels held together by a metal connector at the bottom and zip ties. We didn't care, it worked. They built the fence, but they left a huge gap between the sidewalk and the backyard and the fence, about a foot deep and wide enough that I could fit my whole leg in it, no problem. They also left the temporary fence for 2 weeks until my dad took it apart and heaved it over the fence. Also, my front gate had to be taken apart, and instead of building it the way it was originally, it was connected to fence, went as wide as sidewalk, but then another little bit of fence was built to connect it to the house. Instead, they built me a barn door instead of a gate, so heavy that it leans, so I have to lift it every time I go to open it, or else it's hard to get it unlocked. I also don't have sidewalk where the new lock was. It dipped down into a rock bed where I would be too short to even reach the lock. Called my landlord, and he had the guy have the workers come back twice, once to pack the gap they left behind, and then the second time so they could add paving stones to the rock bed so that I could reach the lock. Again, this was all done on the guy's dime, and when he tried to complain about it, my landlord reminded him that this could have gone a whole other way and be costing him a lot more money. Also, that he could make him have them rebuild the gate to the original instead of just fixing the problems they created. Hope you guys enjoyed. My Karen girlfriend is demanding I take down certain pictures. I, 26 male, think that this is completely ridiculous, but maybe I'm actually wrong, so here goes. I've been with my girlfriend, who's 26, for 5 years, but we've known each other since we were 15. I'm fortunate enough to have my own place, and we've discussed for a while her moving in with me, as she's been staying in the house more often. This wasn't a problem until she was about to move in. I have a few photos in the house of me with members of my family. The problem is with a specific photo of me with my brother and father. She told me to remove the photo before she moved in to accommodate her. I asked her why. She answered that it was weird, but to me, there's nothing weird about the photo. She's the one making it weird. Maybe the one weird thing about the photos is that all of them are from when I was a kid. She had no other arguments, and in the end, I refused, and she said she wouldn't move in, and I was okay with that. This has been a topic of discussion for the past few days. Some of our friends, and even my father, said that I should just remove the photo to make her feel welcome, but I just find that, again, this is ridiculous. Edit. I won't post the photo because I don't feel comfortable doing so, but I will describe it in as much detail as possible. The photo was taken when my brother was 6 and I was 7. In the middle is my father with a grin from ear to ear, his eyes closed and his arms extended to his sides. To his left is my brother, buzz cut, standing straight with his arms at his side like a soldier and a serious face. To my father's right is me, long hair, standing like a boxer from 1910 with my chin up and a mean mug, all wearing a suit because it was taken at my uncle's wedding. The photo was taken outside the place where the event took place. There's nothing exceptionally related to the place. The only things aside from us is the sun, the blue sky, and a bunch of trees. She has met my family. She's always been respectful and friendly with them and vice versa. There hasn't been any incidents or problems with any of them. I've asked her and she has denied it. Her problem is with the photo I described above. I have other photos with my father and brother individually. I do the same pose in various photos. I have one doing the same pose with my paternal grandfather when we were both wearing boxing gloves. He taught me the pose. She stayed in the house multiple days, even weeks. She has things here. She never brought up the issue. I'm all for compromising, but I need a proper explanation other than it's weird. I still have long hair, even longer than before. She's very fond of it and it's not a problem. None of the photos stand out. They're put on a small part of the wall in the living room with the others, including the ones where I'm with her. They're not big, or I'd basically be upholstering the entire wall. She had issues with her family, but they solved it. But I don't rule out that something may have happened that she hasn't told me about. She hooked up with your brother. That's why the photo makes her uncomfortable. There's no other explanation. Leave it to the Redditors to jump to the absolute worst possible conclusion, and then offer advice to break up. Maybe she isn't zeroing in on this one photo, but is hoping you'll take 1 or 2 down to make room for a photo or 2 of her own. I'm not buying what the others are selling, but if this is the case, she needs to use her big girl words and ask for space to hang photos, not whatever this passive-aggressive power move BS is. I totally agree with you. This is a passive power move of some kind. They've been together for 5 years, and only now she picks a specific totally innocent picture which has a real memory value attached to now make an issue about it? To the point of not moving in? Yeah, this is something else, because that excuse from her is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. There is absolutely something weird here. I can think of 2 scenarios. 1, something's wrong with that photo. It triggers a past memory. Or 2, it's an attempt by her to see how far she can control the living space. I'll reserve my vote. You should have talked to your girlfriend to get to the bottom of why she's so adamant. If she simply refuses to say, and it's literally a deal breaker, then I think you have to think about whether you love her enough that you can let this go. or whether it's okay to continue to love someone who acts like this and will likely act like this in the future. Not the jerk. When I read the title, I fully expected it to be a photo of you with an ex or something, but it's just you with your family, doing normal stuff, and she can't even explain to you why it's weird. Something fishy is going on here. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his girlfriend? Please let us know. If you're gonna call a photo of my family and I weird, you better have an explanation for it. Husband demands I pick up his brother's son from school. My husband, who's 37, took in his nephew, who's 12, after his dad, my husband's brother, was diagnosed with cancer. He told me that his nephew would be staying with us until his dad completes his chemo treatment. I agreed, although he did not consult me about it first. But I told him that he'll be his responsibility, not mine. He asked me to explain why, and I told him it's because, 1, he didn't consult me before taking his nephew in, and 2, I'm not equipped nor experienced in taking care of or being committed to childcare. I still have to cook and clean, obviously. He said it was fine and that he'd be taking care of him on his own. The other day, he called me in the afternoon saying he was stuck in a 2-hour meeting and asked if I could go pick up his nephew from school. I said I was having lunch with Mom and discussing family issues. He insisted, but I reminded him that he said he'd be taking care of his nephew, including a school pickup and drop-off. I suggested he try to get off work or call some family member to go pick him up. He tried to argue, but I hung up. I went home at 3 and surprisingly found my husband there. He was angry. He started going off on me, calling me selfish and unfeeling. I told him that his lack of management wasn't my fault. He yelled, saying that my lunch with my mom could have waited, but I chose to be petty, just to prove a point. I said that wasn't true and told him to get over himself and stop acting like he was the victim when he put himself in this situation, knowing he wouldn't commit. He yelled that he was trying to do all he can to help his brother out, but it was me who's playing victim after I refused to help out. We argued some more, and I ended up going to stay with Mom for the night. He texted me some choice words, and that's when I turned my phone off. We're still arguing about it. You're the jerk. You suggested he call some family member to go pick him up? That's exactly what he did, his wife, who should be a partner in the relationship. You're displaying zero empathy to a family suffering through the effects of cancer. Your husband may lose his brother and your nephew his dad, but you'd rather score petty points because you weren't consulted about helping family going through chemotherapy. You'd better hope you never get cancer because I'm not sure you'll have a support system. 100%. This whole post reads like her husband is her annoying roommate and not actually her husband and partner. Seems like a very individualized situation instead of a partnership. Plus, regardless, how is any of this the nephew's fault? Why take it out on him? I agree with the point, but husband wasn't behaving like a partner either. Partners talk to each other before making big life decisions like taking in a family member. I feel like this marriage has some serious dysfunction. You're the jerk. Cold, heartless, and petty. Also, weird that you're married, yet you chose to call the kid your husband's nephew, and never once did you say our nephew, even though you are his aunt by marriage. Wow, this is the most cold-hearted crap I've ever read. Strong, you're the jerk here. That's your husband and your nephew. They are your family. You speak about your nephew like he's a dog and not a human. The kid whose dad has cancer needing collecting from school far outweighs your need for a lunch date with your mom, as does your husband's need to be at work. Could you and your mom not have collected him together and taken him for a bite to eat afterwards? Even if it's not something you wish to do on a regular basis, why won't you help your husband out on just one occasion? You're supposed to be a team, and this is one of the most selfish things I've ever read. Fair play to your husband for putting up with this. He's a better person than I am. Everyone sucks here. Your husband should never have sprung a whole entire kid on you without consultation, and I understand not wanting to give an inch lest your husband take a mile. But you also picked a jerk hill to die on. It would not have required a great deal of childcare to pick up the kid from school. His father is already gravely ill. He's been transferred out of his home, and one of the adults in his new home basically wants to pretend that he doesn't exist. This kid is going through enough, and you were willing to let him feel even more abandoned to prove a point to your husband. That's just foul. Not the jerk. Please don't mind all these complete idiots calling you the jerk. Your husband is the one who's the jerk here. I'm really disappointed in these replies because I thought Reddit was a little more modern in their views. Your sorry excuse of a husband has no right to demand you pick up his nephew. If I was you, I'd already be cheating on this loser and planning on leaving him. Please get a divorce ASAP. You deserve so much better than what this complete nobody has to offer. Also, don't feel bad about the kid. Not your monkey, not your circus, sis. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her husband? Please let us know. Some circumstances cause so much resentment in a relationship that it's doomed to fail. This sounds like it could be one of them. Am I the jerk for returning my stepdaughter's birthday gift because she didn't save a cupcake for my daughter? I, female 33, am engaged to my fiancé, male who's 36. I have a 4-year-old daughter and he has a 16-year-old daughter. He comes from a conservative family, so we won't move in together till after marriage. So far, we're on good terms as a blended family. But I noticed that my stepdaughter acts kind of distant towards my daughter. Every time I try to talk to my fiancé about it, he'd tell me to give the kids a chance to bond and warm up to each other. My stepdaughter's 16th birthday took place on Sunday. Since she's into baking, she decided to bake cupcakes instead of having an actual birthday cake. My daughter and I went over to my fiancé's house to attend the party, and I brought my stepdaughter a gift, which was an iPhone. We sat down as she started serving everyone cupcakes. Then when it was my daughter's turn, she bluntly said she was sorry, but she didn't save any for my daughter. I felt confused. I asked if she had made enough cupcakes and whether there were guests that came uninvited. She said no, and that she just didn't make one for my daughter. I asked why, and she refused to say. I was so mad and felt hurt on my daughter's behalf. I got up and told my fiancé that I wanted to leave. My fiancé tried to stop me and offered his cupcake to my daughter, but I refused to take it. On the way out, I grabbed the gift I bought for my stepdaughter, and she stood there and watched. I could hear her yell, "Dad, she took the iPhone," while I was walking out with my daughter. My fiancé tried to get me to go back inside, but I refused. Later, he came over and we had an argument. He said that I overreacted and that I know how some teenagers can be moody and do random stuff without an explanation, so I shouldn't have taken it personally. I said she excluded my daughter and didn't even save her a cupcake, but he said it was just a cupcake and then reminded me that he offered his cupcake and said I should have just accepted it and called it a day. He said taking the iPhone, which was supposed to be a gift, back was poor taste and it might hurt my relationship with his daughter. I refused to give it to him so he could give it to her since she was crying about it. He left and he was mad at me. We haven't talked since then except via text. Edit. She's been wanting to get the iPhone for a while, and since her dad couldn't buy it, I decided it would be a nice gift if I gave it to her. For those who are asking how a teenager can own an iPhone, I'm sorry if it's uncommon where you live, but where I live, iPhones are the most common phones. Also, I saw that she served her girlfriend a whole plate of cupcakes, so it's not like she baked a specific number. Not the jerk, and don't marry this man. He will clearly expect you to cater to his kid at the expense of your own. This is who he is. Believe him and react accordingly. Yep, a 16-year-old is acting like this because she's been allowed to. And with only a few years before adulthood, the odds of her growing out of it aren't in OP's favor. Wow, your stepdaughter-to-be is a mean girl, which is a polite way of saying that she's a brat. Brats are cultivated. Your fiancé allows this for the last 16 years. He's not going to change. Best of luck to you and your daughter having to deal with this crap. You sound kind of awesome. You deserve so much better. Not the jerk, but wake up. Why are you the one paying for the expensive gift? The iPhone should be a parent or a grandparent gift, not from you. Leaving was your only option at that point. It takes a special kind of ugly to want to exclude a 4-year-old from a birthday celebration. If stepdaughter can verbalize that she intentionally did not make a cupcake for your daughter, she's old enough to understand why you left. Edit. The more I think about this, the worse it gets. The stepdaughter being a jerk is one thing, but the fiancé's reaction is unforgivable. I also wouldn't be able to get over his whole family standing by and acting as if a teen bullying a preschooler is no big deal. This man and his whole family showed you who they are. Believe them. OP, you need to put major brakes on this relationship. Keep your finances separate. Consider it a blessing in disguise that you haven't moved in together yet. If you're not ready to break up, you should pull way back on the money you spend on your boyfriend. Are you paying for trips and little luxuries? Try taking a break for a few months and see how he reacts. Open your eyes. Oh, and I think you should give your daughter the phone. Let her use it to watch Disney movies like Cinderella, maybe with a cupcake phone case. You need to be better at timekeeping. Okay then, I will. I saw a post earlier on that reminded me of this story from a job I had a few years back and one of the worst bosses I've ever worked for. It goes like this. This one day in particular, I arrived at work the same time as my team leader's boss. I walk across the car park and in through the doors to our office, merely seconds after him. He doesn't say anything to me from across the car park, even though he saw me. He doesn't even acknowledge me at all. The time was 7:03, and I was supposed to start at 7, just like him. Later that day, my team leader gets an email from this guy telling him to go off on me for being late. My team leader, who also happens to be a good buddy of mine outside of work, didn't go off on me, but instead replied and told his boss that I regularly work an hour or so later after work and don't claim any overtime for it. At the time, I was young and didn't have any commitments waiting for me back home, and I was the type of guy who would want to finish a job off before leaving. My team leader's boss told him that he didn't care, that my working day started at 7 and he expected me at my desk at that time every day. He said he was sick of my relaxed attitude towards timekeeping. My buddy showed me the email back and forth between them. He wasn't supposed to, and he just shrugged and said something like, "At least now you know. I don't give a hoot. As far as I'm concerned, you do more than your stated hours, but he's clearly going for you. Just watch your back." So I decided I'd take the boss's words to heart, and from that day until I left, for a much better job, I arrived at work at 6:50 each morning, got myself a morning brew, and sat at my desk not doing anything until 7, when I would start work. Even when I got to the office early, I'd sit in the car park until it was time, and I left exactly at my finishing time of 15:30, every single day. The boss didn't notice, of course, until a few months later. A big job dropped just before home time, as they often did, and they needed someone to stay on. There was the usual rushing around and hushed discussions from the management about it, and then the boss came over and asked me if I would mind staying on to do the job. I was usually the guy for the job in these circumstances. Most everybody else had families that they needed to be home for. Now, I could have stayed on and earned myself some sweet overtime. I had nowhere I needed to be or anything I particularly wanted to do. But at the time he was asking me, it was only a few minutes to home time. I told the boss that I wouldn't be staying on to do the job. He asked why, and I pointed to the clock and said, "Because it's home time." With that, I shut down my computer, put my coat on, and went to leave. He asked me if I had something to go to, if I had plans for the evening or something, and I just replied blankly, "Nope," and then politely said goodbye over my shoulder as I left. He was absolutely fuming, of course, but he had no power to compel me to stay, and he knew it. I found out in the days that followed that he blew his top and had asked my team leader to gather my timekeeping logs over the past couple of months since he had ordered him to go off on me for being 3 minutes late. He wanted to haul me over the coals for something. When he realized I was keeping exactly the hours I was contracted to keep, he pulled me into his office and asked me why I wasn't being as committed to my role as I used to be, staying back late to get stuff done. I just smiled and very politely explained that staying late after home time for no pay is something that is done out of goodwill, and that he had eroded all of that goodwill when he had my team leader go off on me for being 3 minutes late, on a day I got to work the exact same time as him. And I explained that from that point onwards, my goodwill was gone, and I was only going to do what my employment contract asked of me and nothing more. He was so red in the face, I could tell he just wanted to go off on me, but he had no leg to stand on. My timekeeping had been impeccable, and the work I was doing while at work was to a good standard. He had nothing. All he could say was that he was very disappointed that I felt that way. I just shrugged and asked if there was anything else. There wasn't, so I got up and left his office. I kept my nose clean for a little over a year after that incident, but he was always trying to get me for some reason or another. In the end, I found a very nice job elsewhere, and I heard that after I left, just about the entire department followed suit. The chief of police suggested the revenge. This happened to a friend of mine years ago, and me as well, but he did the revenge. I lived in a small village by the sea. Most people had a small boat with an outboard motor. People were not poor, but far from rich. Someone began stealing gas from the boats on multiple occasions. Lots of people got livid. They lost their gas, of course, but even worse was that several ran out of gas far from shore, potentially very dangerous. A friend of mine went to the local police station and got to talk to the chief of police and got the following advice. Fill a can with gas, mix it with sugar, and put the can in your boat. My friend got a bit concerned and asked if this was illegal and if it could get him in trouble. It's not illegal to mix sugar and gas, it's your gas. If someone steals it, it is no problem of yours. If the thief files a complaint, you can rest assured that I will follow it up regarding all of the thefts." And so he did. A nice brand new can filled to the brim with gas and lots of sugar. The can was gone the day after. Fast forward a week. The local engine repair shop got a pretty new 120 horsepower engine in for repair. As said, a small village, so after checking up on the engine, it was easy for the mechanic to put two and two together. The mechanic told the customer that the engine was far beyond repair, a lie I guess, and that the customer should contact the police because this was sabotage. The police got no complaint. Of course, the story went viral in the small community. The thief was, until then, a well-respected person. The moving van showed up a few months later. How I made my landlord and neighbor pay over $14,000 in fines for harassing me. First of all, before I start, I'm about 80% sure these two are involved with each other in a romantic way. So I travel a lot, and I live in an RV mostly full-time. I've stayed at the same park, however, for the last 9 months. I've had issues here. They've called the police on me for arguing, not joking. They will ignore me in the office, all because there was a small mistake on the paperwork when I stayed here on an overnight 9 months ago. Something happened, and they tried to use that to kick me out. However, the owner said it didn't matter, and all info is pulled from the registration. So blaming the paperwork for being off by 1 year on the RV as a cause for eviction was far-fetched. There were a few other incidents, but I just figured it's cheap here, and I can pay my rent over the phone. Who cares? And don't really plan on going anywhere, as where I am, all the parks are full for snowbird season. Plus, I got a new job here. Anyways, we had a neighbor who was miserable. We could tell from day one. We also have 2 cats. They hang out on our porch mostly all the time. Occasionally they stray, but they're older and don't go far. So around 6 weeks ago, after 9 months of being my neighbor and never saying a word, he started acting very erratic. Randomly approached my wife as she was washing the car outside and got in her face and started screaming, saying that he dug cat poop out of the dirt behind his 1979 bus on bricks, and now he was going to put traps out and poison. Somehow, management had heard the commotion and he had told them to come, but they pulled up and quickly pulled him to the side to talk to him privately, refusing to even listen to us. We were very weirded out, calling him baby, sweetheart, etc. So they said, "It's his space. He can trap all he wants. If your animals are going onto his property, then that's your fault." Now, this park is known to have so many cats, they keep feeders by the front office. I warned them what they were doing was illegal, but they said, "We've been doing this a long time. We know exactly what we're doing. Call animal control if you don't believe me." I said, "Okay," but he threatened to hurt them, so I'm making a police report. In case anything happens, I want him to be on record as having threatened them. They came, took the report, and oh man, did that make him mad. Still at this point, I hadn't figured out how to get my revenge. Animal control said it was legal and didn't do anything. We immediately got the cats microchipped and went to Lowe's to buy cat traps to teach our cats what a trap is and how to not go into one. Easiest trick I've ever taught an animal. Took 1 try, and now they're terrified of anything resembling a trap. We were stumped. The cats were going stir-crazy. Then 5 days later, she leaves a letter on my door, a self-help eviction saying I have no choice but to leave immediately, and she was turning off the power on this day. I told her if she did, I would call the local police, as that's a self-help eviction, and you've already demonstrated malice by calling the police on me for asking you a question you don't like. Assisting in the trapping of my cats while encouraging other cats to stay. Self-help evicting, and at one point she refused my CDC declaration letter, and I have all these things recorded on video. On top of all of this, she says he needs to start his Harley and let it run for 45 minutes to warm up, even if he's not riding. That's what Harleys need. 2 feet from my bedroom window when he knows I work nights and I'm asleep. Essentially trying to force me out, saying my dummy camera isn't allowed, however, his real camera pointed at my space is. I was very prepared for an eviction threat, as these guys get away with so much, being that they can threaten eviction and people will just roll out in their RVs. Not me. No, not me. After the manager finally spoke to the owner, she realized she had dug herself into a hole and now couldn't evict me unless I had not paid rent, as they had refused to show me a contract or any rules the entire time I've been here. They don't like to have written rules, so they can change them as they need. The manager told me I was never allowed into the office unless to get mail, and I must pay rent over the phone with a card. Still though, I wasn't comfortable because my neighbor now had put out around 4 different traps, some as close as 1 foot from my property line. He still hadn't caught anything, so by chance, I ran into a property manager while out shopping for my own trap, and he told me some interesting things. I did a little research and found out that trapping in Nevada is illegal without a permit. Too many protected species. So I knew the cats would never go into a trap. We did about 5 sessions with them, and they got to the point where they even saw the trap, they'd just hide. So I told the landlord, it's fine, he can keep the traps. I had heard from a neighbor that he saw the managers opening up the storage room and loading his truck with animal traps, but he didn't know about our situation, so he was confused. This is when I put my plan together. I knew the longer he saw he was getting his way, the more traps he would put out, and the more erratic he would become. He started revving his Harley for 45 minutes about 3 times a day while sitting inside with the radio on blast. Then he'd get a chop saw and cut lumber into as small of pieces as he could, and then stand 10 feet back and launch them into a steel trailer. I had around 2 gigabytes of video from my cell phone, so I only actually caught about half of it. I knew he was losing it. I put a dummy camera facing his front door, and that's what did it. He got too close and pushed my wife on camera. I had successfully driven him nuts and had what I needed for a civil harassment suit, and I just let him stew. Every few days, I'd notice a new trap. Finally, when he got up to 14 traps, his tiny RV space looked like a landmine of cat traps. My cats were, and probably are still traumatized from the sight. The next move was to call the Nevada Fish and Wildlife. I emailed the pictures of the traps. They finally showed up today and found his 14 traps. The fine is $1,000 per trap. These people also are cops that don't get to ever bust anyone, so they took it very seriously. They confiscated his traps and hit the park with $14,000 in fines. Afterwards, she called me asking me why I would do that. I informed her I'm not done and that I'm building a case on her and her little friend for harassment. I've since been moved to one of the best spots on the property near the $1 million RVs next to the pool and hot tub with a bar and pizza about 200-foot walk. And yes, I begged for a new spot to end this from day one, but she said, "We are booked up full all winter. We won't have even one spot until after Christmas." Open offices suck, but I've proven my point. Okay, so I just turned 20 and was the youngest guy at a company I just half a year started working for. The guy, which was just a bit older, was over 30, and he and I could get along really well, and I was lucky, since I'm quite an introvert, that he took me into a small group of really nice colleagues that were more friends than just work buddies. The office we worked in looked really nice, but all the levels were connected with a large open area, so when someone on the first floor was making a call, people on the third floor could follow the entire conversation. This wasn't a huge deal most of the time, because we always had a radio turned on, and people who wanted to concentrate just put on headphones. Overall, a very informal workplace and no real management layer, just a couple of directors and no actual managers. Me and the rest of the group were sitting on the top floor, and since my buddy was a lunatic, we were laughing and just chatting a bit. In comes a message from the CEO asking me to come into the meeting room, which was only one of 2 closed offices in the entire building. This wasn't that strange, since even though I was young, I had particular skills what the company relied on, so they had often asked if I could join a meeting. But this time, only the CEO sat there, and instead of the usual joking around, he asked me to sit down like a school principal would if you did something wrong. "I noticed that you're coming along nicely with a lot of your colleagues, and I think they really have respect for you. The thing is, it's rather noisy lately, but I don't want them thinking I'm sort of a police officer demanding them to stay quiet since we're all friends in here. So I want you to keep the noise levels down and tell them to stay productive." I told him that I would pass on the message, but that it didn't look like it was my place to tell the people who worked here for years and are all at least 10 years older than I was, that they had to obey my authority since I didn't feel I had any. Well, since the rest of the group dug into the meeting calendar and found out there wasn't anything planned, they instantly looked at me when I came back with those big eyes, which are ready for gossip. I passed on the message, and they were all a bit shocked, stating that they were like this for years and they never had any trouble. A couple of weeks later, I got called into the meeting room again by the CEO. My colleagues directly noticed how I walked away from my desk that I was called in again, as I had my head worried about what the issue was this time. No one else was called in the meantime, just me. And yes, I was asked to sit down again, and the CEO began with a huge sigh. The office is still very noisy. I had a really simple request to keep it down, and you just couldn't listen. You're even the one talking the loudest of all. I was raised to not interrupt people, but that time I did. Well, you've stated before that I have a deep voice which carries through the entire building. Since then, I've done my best to keep my voice down. It didn't matter as he continued his lecture. In the end, he made a conclusion. I didn't want to do this, but I'm going to split you guys up. You guys are no longer allowed to sit where you want, even though we have a flexible workplace. I'm starting with you. You'll be sitting across from me on the first floor. It's not for the noise, it's just better for your productivity. I'll be informing the rest, and you're not allowed to discuss this with them at all. So, being both upset and flabbergasted, I took my laptop and backpack without saying a word and moved to the first floor. I picked up my headphones, which I normally never use, put them on, and went to town on my work. This became my routine for 2 weeks, and if someone had a question, sorry, I have to concentrate on my work. If they needed me in a meeting in order to get a new client, I responded with, I won't be able to be as productive as I need to be. And most of all, I worked exactly the hours I was paid to, instead of coming in 30 minutes early and staying 30 minutes longer as well. The CEO started noticing me turning bitter and tried turning it around. Hi, lovely day, ain't it? Which I responded to with, uh-huh, and putting on my headphones again. Want me to grab you a cup of coffee? No, I'm good, thanks. Even though I still worked my butt off during work hours, it became noticeable that the hourly rate dropped and my colleagues started complaining to the directors that they really needed my expertise, but that I wasn't available for them. The CEO loved calling me into his office, but now that he had to admit to his defeat, I just received a small message while he sat across me. You're free to sit wherever you want. It has come to my attention that it is in the interest of the company if I give you and your colleagues a bit more freedom. He continued to bug me about leaving 5 minutes early, even if I came in 30 minutes before I had to, but he never dared to talk about my work ethics ever again. Moral of the story, don't try to push for more productivity. It might backfire. Oh, and open offices suck.
Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard. Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.